Chapter 1121. Gong Liang Chu stared at the Great Spirit Steel with an expression of shock and disbelief. He had heard that Zhang Yan's magic power was tyrannical. Even though he had only entered the grotto heaven for 200 years, no one in the same generation could compare to him. He had even defeated opponents who had entered the Dao much earlier than him in fights of magic power. Just now, he had also defeated the illusion of Zhang Yan's former opponent, Huang Yugong. Even if there was a gap between them, it shouldn't be too big, so he wanted to test his opponent's methods. Who knew that the moment he used his Dharma, he would be hit by the overwhelming profound energy and be scattered before he could react. This kind of magic power was not only unrivaled among his peers, but even among the second-stage cultivators he knew, there weren't many who could compare to him. He couldn't help but look at Spiritual Master Wei, as if asking if there was anything wrong with the Great Spirit Steel. Spiritual Master Wei said faintly, "Fellow Taoist Gong Liang, there's no need to worry about it. A few Taoists have already fought against Zhang Yan's illusion, and you weren't the only one who suffered." Gong Liang Chu was a bit shocked, but at the same time, he rejoiced in other people's misfortune. He smiled and said, "I see. Qinsong School's Hall Master Du Zhen is indeed easy to deal with." Spiritual Master Wei asked, "Fellow Taoist Gong Liang, do you still want to try?" Gong Liang Chu tossed a jade box over and said, "It's a pity that I only have these pill jades. I'll have to compete another day." He looked at the Great Spirit Steel and clicked his tongue. "But this treasure is really magical. Even my Nether Spring sect doesn't have it." Spiritual Master Wei frowned and said, "Fellow Taoist Gong Liang, you're overpraising me. This treasure is a bit mysterious, but it's nothing compared to your sect's Nether Spring." Gong Liang Chu grinned and said, "There's no need for wise Master Wei to be so modest. Every transcendent artifact has its own unique uses. In terms of battle formations, defensive true treasures and killing true treasures are naturally superior. However, in terms of sharpening one's techniques and evolving divine abilities, your sect's transcendent artifact is unmatched." Spiritual Master Wei shook his head. "I'm afraid fellow Taoist Gong Liang is wrong." Gong Liang Chu was surprised. "Oh, what is wrong?" Reverend Wei said, "My Yuan Yen Grand Spirit Steel is not that rare either. Even if it has such an effect, it's not like there isn't a similar method in the world. According to what I know, that Shaoqing has a sword perception simulation method. In a fight of magical power between fellow disciples, we only need to use the divine intent in the sword to verify it. That's no different from a real fight. Wouldn't it be much better than my magical weapon?" Gong Liang Chu nodded and admitted, "What you said makes sense. However, there's no need for Sage Wei to belittle yourself. These two methods could only be said to have their own strengths. When the Shaoqing sword sense clashed, it would similarly damage one's magic power. It was just that the recovery of magic power was slightly faster. In fact, if one was not careful, they would also be injured. Furthermore, this could only be used for sparring within the same sect and not against external enemies. Otherwise, there would be no need for them to go out and challenge their opponents. The Great Spirit Steel was the opposite. In the end, entering this place wasn't a true fight. Many of the methods he normally didn't dare to use were used to his heart's content, not using pill jades. It can be said that there is no loss to our generation. Dao Master Wei couldn't help but laugh. "Fellow Taoist, do you think that you gave too many pill jades? Are you a little reluctant?" Gong Liang Chu laughed and said meaningfully, "What are you talking about? Fellow Taoists from various sects could come here to temper themselves. What's a few pill jades? Not only do I not feel that it's not worth it, I feel that your esteemed sect is asking for too little." Dao Master Wei's heart shook slightly. At this moment, a maid came over and said, "Dao Master, Taoist Huan of Hunqing sect is here." Gong Liang Chu bowed. "Since Dao Master has a guest, I won't stay here any longer. Farewell." Even though he had suffered a crushing defeat in the Great Spirit Steel, he didn't seem to care about it at all. Just like that, he waved his sleeves and left elegantly. Dao Master Wei sent him off with his eyes. He looked at Gong Liang Chu's back and thought to himself, did this person come here to try on his own, or did he come under the instructions of the Netherworld Spring sect? Or both? As he pondered, A young man who looked to be 17 or 18 years old walked over. The gentle Taoist with snow-white eyebrows walked over. When he got closer, he cupped his hands and said, "Taoist Wei, I'm here again." Tao Master Wei smiled and said, "Do you still want to compete with Tao Master Yen this time?" Tao Master Huan said softly, "Of course." He took out a jade urn from his sleeve and handed it over. Then he walked into the steel with a solemn expression. Tao Master Wei stood on the spot and didn't move. After about 4 hours, the steel shook slightly and flashed with light. Tao Master Huan retreated from inside and closed his eyes. He seemed to be digesting what he had learned from the fight just now. After a long time, he opened his eyes and said self-deprecatingly, "I didn't expect to lose again." Including this time, it was his 4th time coming here. Each time, he fought with Yen Changsheng's illusion, but he didn't win even once. Tao Master Wei couldn't help but ask, why did fellow Taoists choose this person? Spiritual Master Huan smiled and said, "I admire Spiritual Master Yen the most in the Xianmen sect. I've seen all of his techniques, but I can't beat him when it comes to a real fight. He can help me train more than anyone else." After he sighed, he asked with a smile, "When I came in, I saw Tao Master Gong Liangchu go out. Who did he choose?" Tao Master Wei curled his lips and said, "He won against Huang Yugong, but lost to Zhang Yan." Tao Master Huan smiled and said, "He chose Hall Master Du Zhen, but he was unlucky." Tao Master Wei agreed with him. It wasn't that she didn't think Zhang Yan couldn't choose to fight, but that his magic power was too strong and his escape technique was brilliant. Illusions didn't fear death, so as long as you couldn't escape, you would be crushed once your magic power was used up. It wouldn't be of any use in training. She believed that after Gong Liangchu fought with him once, he wouldn't choose this person as his opponent again. Tao Master Huan and Tao Master Wei had a good relationship, but because the sect still had matters to attend to, it wasn't convenient for him to stay. After a few words, he bid farewell and left. After he left, Tao Master Wei walked in front of the Great Spirit steel and waved his sleeve. There seemed to be a ripple on the steel, and after a while, Gong Liangchu's figure appeared. Not only that, he also replayed the battle between him, Huang Yugong, and Zhang Yan's illusions. The time used for the battle within the tablet inscription was exactly the same as in the outside world. Those who entered to battle would obviously be reflected by the spiritual tablet as well. However, those who came here should be aware of this. Therefore, they would hold back and not reveal all of their techniques. After watching for a long time, Tao Master Wei felt tired all over. He knew he couldn't continue, or his spirit would be damaged, so he quickly stopped. However, these scenes weren't too important to her, so it didn't matter if she watched or not. What she cared about was something else. The more people who fought in the steel, the more profound their skills were, and the more powerful the magic treasure would be. A great calamity was coming. In the future, if the sect encountered great danger, she only needed to use the Origin Clam Gate spell to activate it, and it would display unimaginable power. After Tao Master Wu left the Donglai continent, he hurriedly flew back and met up with Tao Master Zhao in the Dongsheng continent. Because he was carrying a great treasure, he was afraid that something might happen on the way back, so he didn't say much. He only said a few simple words, then turned back in the direction of the sect. After a few days, he successfully returned to the Pingdu sect. Tao Master Wu came to the Great Pagoda Pavilion, his body swayed, and he arrived at the top of the pavilion. He bowed and said, "Sect Master Tao Master, I didn't fail the mission, and I've already brought the treasure back." There was a flash of light in the main seat of the shrine, and a tall, handsome young Taoist walked out. He had phoenix eyes and sharp eyebrows, and he was handsome and heroic. Upon closer inspection, his face was somewhat similar to Qin Yu's. It was the Pingdu sect's current sect master, Qi Hongchan. He looked over and said, "Oh, Tao Master Wu's magic power seems to have improved?" Tao Master Wu hurriedly said, "This is because of the light of that magic treasure." He recounted the journey in detail, and in the end, he rejoiced. It just so happens that this treasure was obtained by Qinsong School Tao Master Zhang first. If it had fallen into the hands of cultivators from other sects, I'm afraid it would have been difficult to get it back so easily. Qi Hongchan's eyes moved slightly. He laughed and said, It seems that I owe fellow Taoist Qinsong school a big favor this time, but it doesn't matter. When the great calamity comes, I will definitely return it to him. Tao Master Wu said, Sect Master Tao Master is right. At this moment, Tao Master Zhao said, Tao Master Wu, the sect master is here, why not quickly retrieve the treasure? Tao Master Wu hurriedly said, Please forgive me, sect master. I need to summon the Dharma spirit to retrieve the treasure. However, Qi Hongchan reached out to stop him and said, Wait. Tao Master Wu's movements paused, and he looked over in confusion. Qi Hongchan raised his head and looked around. He had a feeling that when the magic treasure arrived here, it faintly resonated with the pagoda. He also had a premonition that if he summoned this place here, it was very likely that there would be some changes that he couldn't stop. After a moment of silence, he said, You can't take it out here again. Come with me. He rolled up his sleeve, and a wave of magic power enveloped them. Tao Master Wu and Tao Master Zhao couldn't resist it. The scenery in front of them changed, and they were inside a secret cave. Because Pingdu sect had not been established for long, and they relied entirely on the hidden appearance pagoda to cultivate, there had never been an ascended Tao master. Naturally, no one had opened up a small world. However, they blazed a different path, and created a secret cave under the spiritual opportunity of the earth vein. This place wasn't simple, however. It was in the gap between the mountain gate's great formation, and people who didn't know what was going on would be surrounded and attacked by the formation no matter where they went. Even if the great formation was broken, they would use the spiritual opportunity to go somewhere else, and wouldn't be found by outsiders. Qi Hongchan said, Tao Master Wu, you can take it out now. Taoist Master Wu excused himself and sat down cross-legged. Not long after, his Dharma spirit walked out. Then, a bead slowly squeezed out from between his eyebrows. After a few breaths, it completely fell outside. However, it was unknown whether it was because it had met with the Dharma spirit, or because it had arrived here, but it seemed to have produced some kind of unfathomable change. It swayed in midair, and not only did it not land, it flew towards Qi Hongchan, who had the most profound cultivation here. Qi Hongchan focused his gaze, and after looking for a while, he retracted his Qi dynamic and said, Tao Master Zhao, this is a rare opportunity. You can take it and comprehend it. Tao Master Zhao also felt an indescribable attraction from it. After receiving the sect leader's permission, he bowed, then sat down and released his Dharma spirit. With just a thought, the pill pearl suddenly flew in, and the Dharma spirit also swayed, then turned into light and returned to his corporeal body. In an instant, he felt as if he had fallen into an indescribably mysterious place. Wonderful music rang in his ears, and in front of him, there were countless Dharma spirits of different shapes and sizes flying past. The Dharma spirit in his body seemed to have truly merged with his corporeal body, and there was no longer any separation. Finally, he woke up from his deep meditation, and to his surprise, he had broken through another barrier, and his mana was more than a level stronger than before. He let out a long sigh, bowed, and said, Thank you, sect leader, for fulfilling my wish. Qi Hongchan smiled and said, Tao Master Zhao has sat for 9 days, and it seems that you have benefited greatly. Tao Master Zhao said in surprise, 9 days? He couldn't help but be amazed. Just now, it felt like only an instant had passed. He shook his head, and with a thought, the Dharma spirit appeared, and then he sent the pearl out again. This time, Qi Hongchan didn't refuse, but he didn't release the Dharma spirit. He just looked at it indifferently, then put the pearl away into the space between his eyebrows. He slowly closed his eyes and just stood there. Master Wu and Master Zhao both watched with a trace of nervousness. Before long, Qi Hongchan opened his eyes, but his cultivation didn't improve as usual. Instead, there was a strange look in his eyes, and he sighed, So that's how it is. Master Wu didn't dare to disturb him. After waiting for a long time, he saw that Qi Hongchan's expression had gradually returned to normal, and then he carefully asked, Sect leader? How are you? Qi Hongchan looked at the two of them and said, I'm fine. Although you've brought this treasure back, it hasn't fallen into my hands yet. Master Wu and Master Zhao didn't understand. They looked at each other, and Master Wu couldn't help but ask, "Sect leader, what do you mean?" Qi Hongchan said, "This pearl's original body isn't in this world, and it doesn't look like what we saw, but it left behind a guiding qi, like a floating boat casting an anchor on the sea. Only if it comes from the same source can it be guided, and outsiders can't get their hands on it. As for its true location, it still remains in the unfathomable other world. We need to trace it back to its source to find its original body. If this pearl is a well, then we've only found the mouth of the well, but we haven't been able to extract the water." Master Wu suddenly said, "No wonder Master Zhang and Master Tao couldn't take the treasure when they saw it appear. So that's the reason." "However," Master Zhao said, "Sect leader, how can we find the original body?" Qi Hongchan said, "It's not that easy. Not only do we need to borrow the hidden appearance pagoda, but we also need to use the light of the stars, the sun, and the moon. I'll personally oversee the pagoda and combine this pearl with it. But to do this, we must first open the great formation of the mountain gate. When the time comes, it will cause quite a commotion, and the sects will feel it. It's not a good thing." The two of them became serious. Without the great formation to protect the mountain, Pingdu sect would have no means of protection. Although the sects might not attack, it was very possible that they would secretly cause trouble. They knew very well that if they were on the opposing side, as long as there was a chance, they would think of a way to destroy this matter and not let Pingdu sect smoothly grow stronger. Master Wu said, "What should we do? Please tell us, sect leader." Qi Hongchan's expression was calm. He said, "It's not difficult. Send a letter to Qinsong School and ask a few Zenrins to come and protect us. Then we'll be safe." Chapter 11:22. Even though Qi Hongchan had a plan, it was not something that could be done in a hurry. There were still many arrangements to be made. Moreover, even if they could get help from Qinsong School, it did not mean that they would not take any precautions. After all, it wasn't just Yu Shao, who was their enemy, that was keeping an eye on them. There were also the 6 sects of the Devil sect, and they had many strange and unpredictable methods that were impossible to guard against. When he was concentrating on refining the treasure, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't interfere. Obtaining the treasure this time was an opportunity, but it also contained great danger. Therefore, at this time, they had to be more careful. The more prepared they were, the higher the chance of success. Zhenren Wu reminded, "Sect leader, there are rumors that the sky demon is near Pingdu cult. We have to be on guard." Qi Hongchan's expression became more solemn. Previously, the demonic sects used the excuse of eradicating the 6-in demon bug to send disciples into Pingdu cult to search, but he stopped them all. However, he was very clear that their real goal was to find Sima Quan. In reality, other than Xuanwu and demonic sects, this demon was the real enemy that they had to be on guard against. He said in a deep voice, "It's not that there's no way to solve this. Inanna Temple is an ally of the Yudzong sect, just like us. This sect has countless methods to subdue demons. We can ask for their help this time." Both Zhenren Zhao and Zhenren Wu agreed. Actually, even without the relationship of being an ally, the 3 Western sects were still looking out for each other. If he asked for help, Huanzhen Temple would not refuse. It was a pity that Zhenren Yuling from Lishan sect had already ascended. Otherwise, with him around, no one would dare to disturb them. Zhenren Zhao said in a low voice, "Sect leader, this matter concerns the fate of Pingdu cult. The mountain gate formation cannot be touched, but we cannot place all our hopes on outsiders." Qi Hongchan felt that it was reasonable. It was not that he did not trust Ming and Huanzhen sects, but these 2 sects were still outsiders. They would not protect Pingdu cult like they protected their own sect. Therefore, they still needed their own support. He asked, "Zhenren Zhao, do you have any ideas?" As the sect leader, he only needed to grasp the big picture. However, there were many minor details that were not considered thoroughly. This required the sect elders to make up for the deficiencies. Taoist Master Zhao said, "May I ask, sect leader, how many days will it take to refine that treasure?" Qi Hongchan thought for a moment, then said, "It's hard to say for sure, but it'll take at least 10 days. It should be within half a month." Enlightened Master Wu couldn't help but frown. The longer it took, the more variables there would be. In a situation where there was no mountain gate formation, it was very difficult to guarantee that no accidents would happen during this period. Even those who had no enmity before would have strange thoughts. Taoist Master Zhao said in a deep voice, "Since we need to receive the light of the sun and moon, can we do this first? Do it first?" Qi Hongchan was deep in thought. Taoist Master Zhao drew a circle with his finger. He said, "We can first refine a bright transformation pearl and use it to gather the essence of the sun and moon. We can then release it at the very last moment. This way, we can at least shorten the refining time by 3 to 4 days." Taoist Master Wu's expression shook and he said, "Sect Master, Elder Zhao's method is feasible." Qi Hongchan also nodded. As long as he used the hidden aspect spirit pagoda to absorb the essence of the sun and moon, anyone with good eyesight would be able to roughly determine how long he would need to complete this task. One could roughly determine how long it would take for him to complete this, and those with ulterior motives would naturally be able to deduce the most suitable time to strike. Think about it for the last 3 to 4 days. The mountain gate formation suddenly closed and changed to absorbing the essence of the sun and moon from the bright transformation pearl. That would definitely catch the enemy off guard, and there was even the possibility that all of their arrangements would fail. Qi Hongchan asked, "Taoist Master Zhao, is there enough in the sect's treasury to refine a bright transformation pearl?" The bright illumination bead could only be used to gather the qi of the heavenly stars, sun and moon, and could only be used in certain special circumstances. However, the refinement process required many precious materials, and the process was very complicated. It could take up to a year, so normally, no one would refine such a costly magic tool. However, as long as they could fuse the bead with the spirit pagoda, the price was extremely worth it. Taoist Master Zhao said, "The precious materials in the sect are only enough to refine 50 or so. I'm afraid this number won't be enough. We need at least 100 or more. We need to find more precious materials." Qi Hongchan said, "All right. Distribute the required precious materials and order all the sects under the sect to search for them. Whoever pays up first will be exempted from 100 years of offerings." Taoist Master Zhao bowed and said, "As you command." Although the Pingdu sect did not have 100 or so small cultivation sects like the Qinsong school, they still had dozens of sections. The precious materials used to refine the bright transformation pearl were not used in the past, and they were not rare treasures. Taoist Master Zhao believed that with a command, they would be able to find all of them quickly. However, when it was time to officially take them in, they would not speak the truth. They would also add many precious materials that were not visible to the naked eye. This way, they could prevent others from seeing through the Pingdu sect's true intentions. At this moment, Taoist Master Wu said in a low voice, "Sect Master, I think there is still a huge oversight here." Qi Hongchan said, "Please speak, Taoist Master Wu." Taoist Master Wu said slowly, "If during the refinement, someone covered the sky and cut off the light of the sun and moon, what should we do?" Qi Hongchan was startled. Then, his expression became extremely serious. He said, "Elder Wu is right." He had not thought of this before because it would be a joke if an ordinary person from the Grotto Heaven did it. Any cultivator of the same generation could easily break through the situation. However, if it was someone who had refined the origin fetus, it would be different. Not to mention others, even some secret treasures in the legends could do it. He thought about it deeply. Although these people were confident in their status, once they sensed that the hidden appearance pagoda might have unexpected changes, it would be fine if they did not have the opportunity. However, if they did, they would most likely make a move. If he did not think of a way to solve this problem and acted rashly, he would only fall into a passive position. Taoist Master Wu sighed and said, "It's a pity that after Taoist Master Zhao and I obtained the precious pearl, we only broke through one barrier. Sect Master's cultivation did not improve at all. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to worry about this." They all knew that the sect leader had broken through the 5th barrier a long time ago, but he was still unable to break through to the 6th level. They originally thought that he could use the orb to break through to the next level, but there was no change in his hands, which made them a little disappointed. Qi Hongchan smiled and said, I sense something. If we can use this treasure to fuse, our cultivation will improve greatly. Not to mention breaking through the 6th barrier, it won't be difficult for us to reach the 7th level in one go. What? Taoist Master Zhao and Taoist Master Wu were pleasantly surprised when they heard this. The Pingdu sect had the hidden appearance pagoda, which could ensure that its legacy would not end. However, it was also limited by this. Including the sect master, there could only be 3 people in the grotto heaven at most. If they could succeed this time, they would not be able to fuse the treasure. Not to mention refining treasures, as long as the sect leader reached the 3rd stage realm, it would be much easier to deal with the upcoming calamity. Qi Hongchan said, however, it's too early to talk about this. This matter cannot be solved by the Pingdu sect alone. Looks like I need to talk to sect Master Qin personally. After a long discussion, he ordered the 2 elders to make arrangements first. At the same time, he sent a disciple to Qinsong School to deliver the token with his light-splitting shadow transformation to sect Master Qin. After some discussion, they finally made up their minds and prepared with all their might. At the bottom of the southwest, in a deep ravine, Hui Xiao, dressed in a white muslin, walked into the cave hall. She knelt in front of the cauldron and said, Master, disciple has something to report. Black gas flew out from the cauldron and slowly gathered to form a demonic cloud. Sima Quan floated out and asked, What is it? Right now, his magic power had completely recovered. However, he still did not dare to show himself. However, if something happened in the Donghua continent, he would definitely think of a way to get involved. Hui Xiao said worriedly, Master, dozens of small sects from the Pingdu sect have gone out to search for treasures. There are even many disciples who have gone underground. It seems like they are planning something big. Sima Quan was very surprised. These days, other than cultivating, most of his attention was placed on the 6 demonic sections. Firstly, it was to control the 6 demon bug to collect spiritual opportunity. Secondly, it was to activate the heavenly cauldron to wander around. He wanted to collect the broken pieces of the sunglasses and see if he could use them to refine them into a talisman. Although he paid attention to the Pingdu sect, which was close to him, he knew his limits and rarely provoked the disciples of the sect. He knew that although it was dangerous for his sect to be here, he could use it to block the demonic sect's line of sight. After hearing this, he did not dare to be careless. He thought for a while and said, Do you have the treasure catalog? Hui Xiao said, I have brought it. She nimbly took out a piece of silk from the sachet. Sima Quan's gaze focused and flew in front of him. With a casual glance, he knew that these precious materials were used to refine weapons. However, they had already been altered. Even if he knew how to do this, it would be difficult for him to find any clues from this. However, the Pingdu sect would not have made such a big move for no reason. They must have some ulterior motive. This piqued his interest. He said, Go and find out what this person is trying to do. Hui Xiao said, I have already arranged for spies to investigate. However, the Pingdu sect did not leak any information this time. There has been no news until now. Sima Quan thought for a while and thought, Looks like I have to do it myself. With a thought, hundreds of demons flew out of the cauldron and flew towards the surface. Qinsong School, floating heavenly palace. Qin Yu stepped into the main hall and walked down the stairs. She bowed and said, Greetings, sect leader senior brother. Qin Mabai's expression was amiable. He said from the jade platform, Junior sister, you may dispense with the formalities. Sit down and talk. Qin Yu expressed her thanks and went to sit at the banquet table. Qin Mabai said, Junior sister, you already know about the Pingdu sect's fellow Taoists. I would like to invite you on this trip. Qin Yu said without hesitation, If senior brother Hongchan needs help, I will definitely help. However, sect leader senior brother, may I know which fellow disciple will be accompanying you on this trip? Qi Hongchan was her aunt's son. They were cousins. Naturally, he did not hide the matter of refining the precious pearl. She knew that it was not enough to rely on her sect alone. Sect leader Qin said, Junior sister, who do you think would be convenient? Qin Yu thought for a while and said, If possible, junior brother Shen and junior nephew Yen would be suitable. She hesitated and said, "Can Zhang Yan go?" Sect leader Qin said, "Hall Master Du Jin is still outside the continent and has not returned. However, since junior sister has decided on him, let him go. However, you will have to wait for some time." Qin Yu said seriously, "Then I will wait for him." Sect leader Qin glanced at her and nodded. The Pingdu sect's hierarchy had personally invited Huoxian. Out of courtesy, the Yinsong sect had to send one person from each of the two halls. Huoxian was a very suitable candidate. He also had the 36 mounts, which could be used as protection. However, he was still in the first stage of the Elephant Realm, and the enemy he would be facing this time might not be simple. It would be difficult for him to deal with them. However, Zhang Yan was different. Ever since he formed his own method, he had fought with his peers several times. It could be said that he was ferocious and powerful. With him around, the deterrence power was not something others could compare to. When Zhang Yan received the sect leader's message, he was still on his way back. He thought about how Taoist Master Wu had come to retrieve the core pearl and knew that there was a connection between the two. However, before the great calamity, the strength of the friendly alliance would rise. This was something he was happy to see happen, so he immediately wrote back, saying that he would return as soon as possible. A day later, he had already arrived at the East Sea. He called the scholar in white over and said, "Do you want to stay here or follow me to the Donghua continent?" The scholar in white hurriedly said, "I am willing to find a place to stay in the East Sea." He and Yuan Zhangqing were both Yuanine cultivators. From him, they learned that there were sects in the Donghua continent, and almost all of them had people from the Grotto Heaven in charge. Moreover, the spirited mountains and famous mansions were all occupied by many sections. Even if they went there, there would be no place to stay. It was better to choose a place on the East Sea. Although there would be less spiritual opportunity, it would avoid a lot of fighting. Zhang Yan nodded. He shook his sleeve and threw out a few bottles of pills. The scholar in white hurriedly went forward to receive them. He bowed and left the pagoda. He called his disciples and left the place, heading toward the sea. At this time, Tao Xinren drove the carriage to the side of the pagoda. He bowed and said, "Xinren Zhang, I was busy recovering my mana and have delayed the matters in the South Sea for a long time. Now that I am back, I need to go back and help fellow Li and fellow me," Zhang Yan said. "I heard that Yu Xiao has made arrangements again. Be careful, fellow Taoist." Tao Xinren nodded to show that he understood. After Wu Riang's death, Yu Xiao's school did not let go of the matters in the South Sea. They ordered Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunbi to guard the Fengling Ocean. However, after Wu Fenggu formed the Grotto Heaven, he sent him over and called Zhou Ruiying back to take care of the mundane affairs of the sect. However, after all, in the eyes of Tao Xinren, even if there were 3 of them, Wu Riang alone was not a bigger threat, let alone these 2. Zhang Yan said goodbye to Tao Xinren here, then drove the carriage to Pingyuan sect. He did not conceal his aura during this trip. Before he reached the mountain gate, Jiang Zheng and Dan Huizhen could already feel the monstrous spiritual vigor and came out to greet him. Zhang Yan glanced at him. After not seeing him for a period of time, Jiang Zheng's mana could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds. He nodded and said, "I didn't expect you to be ahead of them. It seems that you are still lacking. This time, you can follow me back to Qinsong School to cultivate." Hearing this, Jiang Zheng was delighted. He immediately kowtowed and said, "Disciple thanks Master for fulfilling my wish." He turned around and said a few words to Dan Huizhen, then went up the pagoda. Dan Huizhen took a few steps back. In a flash, mist rose up, and in the midst of the dragon's roar, a carriage flew up, bringing along the wind and clouds as it headed north. Chapter 11:23. Not long after Zhang Yan returned to the sect, he was summoned to the main hall by the sect leader. After a long conversation, he left the floating celestial palace and headed towards the sky. Very quickly, he arrived at the Azure Sky Hall. After dismissing the maids who came to greet him, he came to the front of a temple and said, "Is fellow Taoist Jing Tsong here?" There was a flash of light, and an old and gray-robed Daoran appeared. He bowed and said, "Fellow Taoist, why did you summon me?" Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said, "This time, there is something that I would like to ask for fellow Taoists help with. Popular. Founding Master Jing Tsong said, thanks to fellow Taoists' help last time, Daoren was able to avoid a disaster. If fellow Taoist has any request, I will do my best to help. Zhang Yan told him about Ping Du Sect's request for help from Qinsong School. Then he said, according to sect leader Qi, to refine this pagoda, one needs to receive the essence of the sun and moon. However, they are afraid that someone will use mana to cover the sky. I think that Jinren's Celestial Fire 6 Control's true technique has the ability to pierce through heaven and earth, so I would like to ask for Jinren's help to open up the situation. Although founding Master Jing Tsong avoided the heavenly demon earlier, that was because he was only a split soul of his divine consciousness. Innately, he was restrained. However, he was left behind by an ascended Jinren after all. With the morning startling sky, his methods were not weak. Otherwise, he would not have dared to say that he would go against Yuxiao School. Founding Master Jing Tsong said thoughtfully, so, Ping Du Sect has already found the item that guards the pagoda. Zhang Yan said, from Zhenren's tone, you seem to know the details of that treasure? Founding Master Jing Tsong shook his head and said, speaking of details, I actually don't know either. I've only heard my master mention that there is such a pagoda in Donghua continent, but no one can get it. Moreover, every few years, it will definitely be moved elsewhere. They would definitely move it somewhere else. Later on, someone discovered that this treasure was missing a pagoda protecting pearl, and it was already an incomplete item, so they gradually lost interest in it. Who would have thought that the founder of Ping Du Sect would obtain an opportunity? Zhang Yan nodded. Ancestral Master Jing Tsong's words were not empty words. It was impossible for this person's cultivation to have come out of thin air. It was reasonable for someone to inherit it. It was highly likely that he was originally a disciple of some cultivator in the Western continent. Ancestral Master Jing Tsong stroked his beard in thought. He said, there's only one thing I don't understand. Although I don't know the ins and outs of your Qinsong school, I think it won't be difficult for your honorable school's sect leader to solve this matter. Wouldn't it be better for him to take action? Why do you want me to take action? Zhang Yan said, if sect leader Reverend were to make a move, our enemies would use this opportunity to spy on us, and it would be disadvantageous to our future plans. A sect leader. Unless it was a matter of the rise and fall of the sect, they would not make a move directly. Even if they had to deal with an enemy, they would not use methods that were too direct. This was especially so when there were external enemies. The two families of Qinsong and Yuxiao were enemies with each other at the moment. Even their own people did not know what level their opponents had reached, let alone outsiders. Therefore, they could only guess between each other, and it was difficult for them to really see it clearly. However, if anyone made the slightest move, there was a high possibility that their opponent would see through them. Then they could be targeted and set up. Although Venerable Lingya had used a talisman to drive away the heavenly demon previously, it might not have been his true mana at this moment. It was very likely that he had refined a talisman in the past and tossed it out. It was more likely to cause Qinsong to misjudge. Ancestral Master Jing Tsong expressed his understanding. He said cautiously, it's just that there's something wrong with this. This Venerable Lingya still doesn't know that I'm here. If I make a move, he might find out. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to catch him off guard in the future. Read the full text. Zhang Yan said, that's right. Fellow Taoist's existence will indeed be of great use at a critical moment. It cannot be exposed carelessly. However, the world knows that the morning shock heavenly palace is in the sky. This time, I will bring my disciple to communicate with the heavenly palace. When others see him, they will at most think that he has fate with this true weapon, so he can control it. And with my help, there's no need to fear that his mana will be insufficient. Ancestral Master Jing Tsong smiled and said, by doing this, that disciple of Taoist will be able to obtain great benefits. Zhang Yan said indifferently, this also requires his will to be strong enough to resist the evil fire and the heart's devil. Otherwise, not only will he not obtain any benefits, it will be harmful instead. Ancestral Master Jing Tsong said, there's another problem. If one person makes a move, I can penetrate through the heavens. but I'm afraid that there will be more than one person making a move. At that time, everything will be for naught. Zhang Yan said indifferently, Jinren only needs to hold off one person. The rest will be taken care of by my Qinsong school. Ancestral Master Jing Tsong looked at him and said solemnly, all right. In all fairness, he was very willing to see Qinsong succeed this time. Yuxiao school was their common enemy. Even if it was just to free himself, he would do his best. After Zhang Yan arranged this matter, he left Azure Sky Hall and returned to Dujin Hall. He called Jiang Zheng in front of him and said, you have a strong will. Even if you are limited by your lack of talent, your heart to seek Tao has not changed. I am very comforted to have such a disciple. I will give you a chance. At this point, he paused and said, this time, you will follow me to Pingdu sect. I hope you will be able to grasp the opportunity. Jiang Zheng did not know what he was going to do this time. He only knew that if it was not for his master leading him into the sect, he would not have been able to make it to where he was today. Perhaps he would have become a pile of bones long ago. He said solemnly, I will listen to master's arrangements. On Pingdu sect's side, after a year of preparation, they had already refined more than 200 Jiaoyi pearls. Among them, 100 were absorbed into the sun and moon essence and hidden in the hidden appearance pagoda. Spiritual Master Wu looked at the few disciples placing the pearls on the array and could not help but sigh. It is a pity that the light of the sun and moon cannot be completely absorbed by these pearls. Otherwise, there would be no need to open the mountain gate array. Spiritual Master Zhao said, do not be greedy. It is already not bad to be able to borrow these. After all, once the essence leaves the pearls, it will be contaminated and will not be as pure as before. From what you see now, this is the biggest limitation. After all, this was a method of borrowing. It was inevitable that the essence that was absorbed into the pearls would not be pure. If the qi that was drawn from the sky was compared to a river, then it would not be a big deal if the water was contaminated with a little bit of dirt. However, if it was all turbid, it would not be able to be refined into a treasure. As they spoke, all the pearls were placed on the array. Spiritual Master Wu waved his hand, and the disciples who placed the Jiaoyi pearls bowed to the two of them. Then, they turned into rays of spiritual light and flew into their respective shrines. At this time, rays of spiritual light flew in from outside the mountain gate. After entering the pagoda, they first bowed to the two of them and flew into their respective shrines. This time, in order to prevent any accidents, they called back more than 300 disciples who had obtained the dermic spirits. These disciples were the true pillars of Pingdu sect. Once inside the pagoda, even if something happened outside, they would not have to worry about damaging the foundation. However, they usually sat in various places, opened altars, and deterred the dozens of small sects and the hundreds of vassal states in the southwest. Now that they had all returned, it might cause these people to become restless. It was even more likely that the disciples of the devil doctrine would sneak into the mountain gate. However, the refining of the treasures this time involved the future fate of the mountain gate. Everything that did not affect the overall situation could be put aside for now. Fortunately, apart from these people, there were no cultivators who practiced other kinds of techniques in the sect. This time, he would temporarily relinquish his authority and rely on it to intimidate everyone. Several hours later, all the disciples with dermic spirits in their bodies had returned. The two enlightened masters arrived at the top of the pagoda and saw sect Master Qi Hongchan sitting on the main seat. He was flipping through a jade scroll. He immediately went forward and bowed. Qi Hongchan raised his head and asked, "Are you ready?" Spiritual Master Wu bowed and said, "Sect leader, all the disciples have returned to their positions." Qi Hongchan said, "There are still 7 days until the appointed time. Fellow Taoist from Qinsong School will definitely arrive soon. We must entertain him well." Taoist Master Wu said, "Yes. I don't dare to be careless." Qi Hongchan looked at the two of them and said in a deep voice, "This is the greatest opportunity since the founding of the Pingdu sect. But at the same time, there are many dangers hidden within. I hope that the two of you will work together with me to overcome this obstacle." Zhao and Wu, two people, solemnly voiced their agreement. Qi Hongchan nodded. His tone softened as he said, with the previous arrangements and the help of fellow Taoists from the Qinsong school, as long as our own families don't fall into chaos, it won't be hard to overcome. Spiritual Master Wu said, I wonder which spiritual masters are coming from the Qinsong school this time? Qi Hongchan hadn't said it before, but now the time had come. He said, there are 4 spiritual masters coming. Junior sister Qin is the most nostalgic, so she must be coming. Hall Master Du Zhen is also among them. When Zhao and Wu heard this, they instantly relaxed. With Hall Master Du Zhen from the Qinsong school here, there shouldn't be any problems. There was no need to ask who the others were. Spiritual Master Wu smiled and said, Sect leader, when the Pingdu Pagoda is completed, we won't become a sect like the 3 great sects, but we won't be weaker than South Flower, Taihao, and the others. Qi Hongchan shook his head and said, it's not that simple. As the sect leader, he could see very clearly. Among the 16 sects in this world, other than Li Mountain sect, which one didn't have a sect treasure? For example, among the 6 demonic sects, the Netherworld Spring sect had that strange and unfathomable Netherworld Spring, the Blood Soul sect had the Blood God Waterfall, and the Jiling sect had the 10,000 Spirit Banner. Without these treasures, they would have been replaced long ago. Even though the power of the Hidden Aspect Pagoda could increase by another level, the foundation of the Pingdu sect was still slightly weak. If given a few thousand years, it wouldn't be difficult to achieve this. But what they lacked now was time. With the great calamity coming, they could only try their best to increase their ability to protect themselves. 7 Victories Pavilion was a small sect under the Pingdu sect. Sect leader Chou Shihua suddenly woke up from his meditation. A black light flashed through his eyes, and the shadow of a demon seemed to flash across his body. He said, it's time to move. The one who occupied this body was a clone of Sima Quan. A few hours ago, he received a message that the Pingdu sect was gathering all disciples to return to the sect. It was also said that all the sect leaders would attend the ceremony at the mountain gate. He immediately sensed that his chance had come, and decided to take over a person's spirit to make it easier for him to sneak in. Originally, taking over the body of a direct disciple of the Pingdu sect was the most suitable, but such disciples all had Dharma spirits protecting them. Once he invaded their spirit, the Dharma spirits would not be able to avoid being tainted and would immediately leave the body. He had no way to stop it, and the sect would immediately see that something was wrong. So he simply gave up on the idea. He left the mountain gate with a normal expression, and did not bring a follower with him. He rose into the sky, and along the way he met many acquaintances, and greeted them calmly. As a heavenly devil, he did not need any memories from this body. He only needed to take a peek, and he could know what the other was thinking. He understood these people even better than Chou Shihua himself. Soon he arrived in front of the mountain gate of the Pingdu sect, chatting and laughing with a few of his friends. However, to his surprise, when he passed through the mountain guarding grand formation, the inspection wasn't strict, and he practically didn't encounter any obstruction before entering the gate. This caused him to feel extremely surprised, and at the same time he raised his vigilance. Under the arrangement of the disciples of the sect, he obediently went to the pavilion and stayed there. Like the other cultivators, he cultivated and meditated. He did not wander around and waited patiently. At the same time, Zhang Yan had already set off for the Pingdu sect with the other 3 spiritual masters. Although they were sent to help the alliance, everyone's expression was calm, and no one was dissatisfied. This time, the Pingdu sect did not ask for their help without paying a price. In reality, they offered a lot of elixir jade. Although the Pingdu sect was a small sect, the Dharma spirit was the foundation. All the source came from the Hidden Aspect Spiritual Pagoda. They did not care about elixir jade as much as the disciples of other sects, so they still had some wealth. For example, in the past, the founder of the sect, Spiritual Master Tafeng, obtained the help of the Qinsong school and snatched the spirit cave from the Xuanshu sect. In return, he gave more than 70% of the elixir jade he obtained to the Qinsong school. It must be known that this was the accumulation of the Xuanshu sect for thousands of years, and the amount was not small. At that time, the sect master, Qin Qinggang, was very satisfied. That was why he chose a Pingdu sect elder as his Tao companion, and from then on, they became allies. They did not conceal any aura during this journey, and all those with profound cultivation could see them at a glance. They could naturally tell from the direction that the four of them were heading towards the Pingdu sect. Most people's reactions were normal. In the eyes of outsiders, the Qinsong and the Pingdu sect were in-laws and also allies. It was normal for them to interact with each other. Perhaps it was the birthday of one of the Pingdu sect elders. Only a few people did not relax, secretly guessing what the two sects were up to. 7 days later, Zhang Yan and the others arrived at the White Cloud platform at the gate of the Pingdu sect. He sat on the dragon carriage and looked down. It was nighttime, and the Pingdu sect had already lit up the fire pagoda. Within a radius of 10,000 miles, there were spots of flames and flowing clouds, twinkling like stars. It was as if the sky had been turned upside down, and it was extremely magnificent under the night sky. Jiang Jing stood behind Zhang Yan. When he saw the scene, he also exclaimed, "What a scene!" Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Looking at the shape of the mountain, it should be the work of the cultivators of the original Xuanshu sect. I didn't expect them to be left behind. Spiritual Master Tofeng is really magnanimous." The Xuanshu sect was originally a large sect in the southwest. A few thousand years ago, it had a period of prosperity. However, it gradually declined due to a conflict with the Shiha sect. The founder of the Pingdu sect, Spiritual Master Tofeng, was originally a member of the imperial clan of the southwest Min nation. There were many cultivators in the nation. After obtaining the hidden appearance pagoda, he used it to cultivate a grotto heaven and challenged the last spiritual master of the Xuanshu sect to a duel. He defeated his opponent and took the spirit cave. Because he defeated his opponent fair and square, he did not destroy the cultivation method of the sect. He only integrated a portion of the cultivators into the Pingdu sect. Until today, these cultivators all regarded themselves as disciples of the Pingdu sect. At this time, inside the Pingdu sect, Qi Hongshan also sensed the change in the sky. He looked up and stood up. "Fellow cultivators of the Qinsong school are here. Spiritual masters, please come with me to welcome them. If you like this work, you are welcome to come." Chapter 11:24. The sky above Pingdu sect was originally silent, but suddenly, auspicious clouds surged. Colorful rays of light shone, and a loud voice shook the sky, spreading for thousands of miles. Someone who knew what was going on shouted, "The enlightened master of Qinsong school is here." Many of the sect's disciples and sect leaders were shocked when they heard this voice. They quickly raised their heads to look. Their cultivation was low, and they had never seen someone from the enlightened master travel. When they saw such a scene, they could not help but be shocked. However, the Dongtian's Dharma power was so powerful that even before he arrived, there was already a clear aura spreading across the sky. When everyone looked over, they could only see countless dazzling profound qi. There seemed to be some blurry figures within the profound qi. It was not impossible to see their exact appearance and how many people were there. Sima Quan, who was among the crowd, also looked up. He had a cold smile on his face, but when he felt the clear aura, his face suddenly changed. He quickly lowered his head, afraid that if he continued to look, he would be sensed by the people above. At the same time, he tried his best to restrain his aura, not daring to let any of it leak out. He thought to himself, "I didn't expect Zhang Yan to be here. Are we going to retreat this time?" In the last battle, he was really scared by Zhang Yan, especially that killing sword. He could not resist it at all. After thinking for a while, he still felt that if he just left like this, he would be extremely unwilling. He decided to assess the situation first. Moreover, this was only a clone. Even if he abandoned it, he could make up for it after a few years of cultivation. Qi Hongshan brought Elder Zhao and Elder Wu out of the big tower. They stood at the highest point of the sect, above the White Cloud platform, and waited. After a while, the sky opened, and 4 Taoists appeared in midair. Qin Yu's skirt fluttered, and her belt fluttered in the wind. Below her was a water mirror lotus. The tip of the lotus was decorated with dew, and the petals were stretched out. Yan Gongzhen stood on the bamboo raft. Bamboo leaves fluttered around him, and a green aura lingered around him. There was a burst of fragrance. Shen Baishuang stepped on the cloud frost. The spiritual light behind him condensed, as if he was leaning against a tall mountain. And in front of the three of them, there was a flood dragon carriage galloping over. Zhang Yan sat in the carriage, and 16 inky flood dragons opened the way in front of him. Curtains covered the top of the carriage, and profound energy surged on both sides of the sky. Distant and distant, fleeting and unpredictable. When the four of them descended from the clear light and landed on the platform, Qi Hongchan brought Zhao and Wu up to greet everyone. He said, "This time, we must thank the fellow Taoists of the Qinsong school for coming to our aid." Zhang Yan was the first to return the greeting and said, "Sect Master Qi is too courteous. Since we're allies, it's only natural for us to help each other." Qi Hongchan had already prepared a banquet below. After greeting Qin Yu and the others, he invited them to take their seats on the high platform. It was not convenient for Jiang Zheng to sit with Taoist Dong Tian. However, as a disciple of Zhang Yan, he was led to the platform on the next level. This table was large and was made in the style of the Pingdu sect. It was in the shape of a Hui character, with only a gap left open. 3 sides could be sat on. There was a small bronze cauldron directly in front of them. After sitting down, 100 or so women came up to perform and sing. He didn't make a sound and only watched quietly. The cups on the table didn't move at all. He was under Zhang Yan's care, and this time, he had official business to attend to. Therefore, he constantly circulated his inner breath, striving to maintain his transcendence energy in a perfect state. Because of this, he was the only disciple of the grotto heaven. The people below knew his identity, but they couldn't figure out his temper, so no one came up for a while. But after a while, 2 people, a man and a woman, came up. The man's hair was tied up high, and his robe was loose. He had the bearing of a king, and the woman wore a crown and a red cape, bright and beautiful. These 2 people seemed to be attracted by the music. Seeing him sitting alone at the table, the man came up and bowed. He said, "Sorry to disturb you, Taoist. May the Wang couple sit here?" Jiang Zheng politely returned the gesture and replied, "Of course." The couple revealed looks of joy on their faces as they thanked him. They then sat down on the right side of the table. They didn't disturb them and only watched the music. When the song ended, the man clapped his hands, as if he was still reminiscing about the music. After some time, he was reminded by the woman before he regained his senses. He then spoke apologetically, "I was too engrossed in the music and forgot myself. I hope Taoist will not blame me." Jiang Zheng didn't mind and asked, "May I know which country you are from?" The man raised his hand and replied, "I am Cheng Rua Huai, the king of Lu country. This is my concubine, lady. May I know how I should address you?" Jiang Zheng replied, "I am Jiang Zheng, and I'm here with my teacher." King Lu was enlightened, "So you're immortal Qinsong. No wonder you're sitting here alone." He then sighed, "The Xianmen sect, the land of immortals. How admirable." Knowing that Jiang Zheng was from Qinsong school, the 2 of them couldn't help but reveal looks of envy on their faces. The southwest was vast, and Pingdu sect was the only sect here. Hence, most of the nobles were believers. However, because Qinsong school and Pingdu sect had a long history, many of the nobles knew that Qinsong school was where the sect was located. However, the 2 of them didn't know much about Qinsong school, and hence didn't take the initiative to find out who his teacher was. Before Jiang Zheng entered Qinsong, he often traveled the 2 sides of the river. The southwest was too far away, and hence he hadn't been here before. After he entered Pingyuan sect, he focused on his cultivation and didn't go out much. Hence, he didn't know much about Pingdu sect. He then asked, "From what King Lu said, you're someone who admires Tao?" King Lu stroked his beard and replied, "Cultivating qi can help you maintain your youthful looks, nourish your character, and protect your life. The benefits are endless." He glanced at Jiang Zheng before he sat up straight and smiled, "Taoist priest, can you tell how long I and my beloved consort are living?" Jiang Zheng laughed. King Lu has already reached the age where he knows his destiny. Consort Lu, on the other hand, is still young. King Lu was taken aback. When he was young, he had consumed a strange fruit. Normally, he would train his qi nonstop. People who didn't know him would be able to tell his age wrongly. King Lu had always been proud of this fact. He didn't expect Jiang Zheng to be able to tell with a single look. He sighed in admiration. He then asked curiously, "How did Taoist friend manage to tell? Did you use some sort of technique?" Although he had opened his meridians a long time ago, he wasn't a proper cultivator. The only reason he was able to reach this place was because he was the ruler of a country. Hence, he couldn't tell what Jiang Zheng's cultivation level was. He could only vaguely sense that Jiang Zheng was extraordinary. Jiang Zheng laughed. "There's no need to use any technique. As long as one's cultivation level is high enough, one would be able to dispel the false and retain the true." When King Lu heard this, he didn't seem to fully understand. Just as he was about to ask again, Consort Lu nudged him gently. She then spoke out, "King Lu, how can a mere mortal like me understand the true Taoist arts?" King Lu hurriedly replied, "Oh yes, yes. I was too rash." After exchanging a few words with him, Jiang Zheng found out about the entire Lu country. Anyone who could read and write would try to learn a thing or two about qi cultivation. Pingdu sect wasn't the only country that was like this. Hundreds of vassal states were like this. This wasn't because these people wanted to live a long life. Instead, it was because the southwest region was filled with poisonous insects and ferocious beasts. Hence, they used this method to strengthen their muscles and bones. As for the disciples of Pingdu sect, most of them were chosen from these vassal states. Hence, they were extremely close to each other. With a single command from the sect, they could mobilize all the forces in the southwest region at any time. Nobody dared to disobey. As King Lu chatted with him, he asked many questions about the Qinsong school. Jiang Zheng only picked out a few unimportant things to tell him. This caused King Lu to gasp in admiration. King Lu sighed, "Cultivating Tao is lonely. I'm a commoner and can't be restrained. It's just that every day I meditate I find it hard to endure. Luckily, I have something to pass the time. Since Taoist Jiang and I are fated to be friends, please have a look." As he spoke, he fumbled around in his sleeves. He took out a small mirror and wiped the surface of the mirror. A 13 or 14-year-old youth appeared. Although his clothes were tattered, it was obvious that he washed them frequently. At this point, he was curled up in a corner of a wall. His face was tilted to the side, as though he was deep in thought. It was obvious that he was listening to something. The light in the mirror turned and he saw a Taoist giving a lesson within the walls. There were more than 20 disciples below him, all of whom were around 10 years old. Other than a few of them who were sitting upright, most of them were drowsy from listening to the lesson. Jiang Zheng looked at him and asked, "Secretly learning Tao?" King Lu slapped the table and replied, "That's right. He's secretly learning Tao. I've watched this youth for a long time now. He's quite intelligent. His family is poor and has no money to study Tao. He can only hide outside the door and eavesdrop. Sooner or later, he'll be exposed. When that happens, he won't have a good ending." Jiang Zheng was born poor and had been living in the mortal world for decades. From the way the youth was dressed, he could roughly guess the situation of his family. He understood that to this youth, eavesdropping here would determine whether or not he could break the shackles of his prison. If he succeeded, he would be able to change the fate of his family. Even if he had to take a huge risk, he would do it. However, King Lu was different. He grew up in the palace and lived a luxurious life. To him, the life of a commoner was something new and interesting. It was something he did when he was bored. At this moment, the scene changed abruptly. A yellow dog came out of nowhere, tearing and biting the young man. Then, a few young men came out with a group of people who looked like servants. They clapped their hands and cheered. Jiang Zheng frowned. Princess Lu gasped and covered her mouth. The youth was bitten and bled profusely. The students within the walls were alerted as well. They ran out and pointed at the scene. Some of them couldn't bear to watch, while others were gloating. None of them stepped forward to stop the youth. King Lu watched with great interest. Princess Lu tugged on his sleeves and begged, "King Lu, This child is too pitiful. King Lu, why don't you bring him to the palace to raise him? King Lu replied, Alright. As long as my beloved princess likes him, I'll help him once. He didn't care about what happened to the youth. However, he liked the feeling of being able to decide the fate of a person. It was as if he had become an immortal. Jiang Zheng's eyes were calm. He was very clear that Princess Lu was a person of high status. Sometimes, she would show pity to the commoners. However, it was a benevolent act. Perhaps after a few days, she would forget about it and throw it to the back of her mind. He calculated in his heart and discovered that the youth was very close to him. After knowing his location, he flicked his finger and a ray of spiritual light flew out soundlessly. Looking at this youth, he couldn't help but think of himself. If he hadn't been fortunate enough to meet his current master, who saved him from the flood, he would have been a pile of bones by now. Since the youth had appeared in front of him, why not lend him a helping hand? 2 altars away, Sima Quan was conversing with the others. At the same time, he was paying attention to his surroundings. Everyone's thoughts were reflected in his mind. However, he was disappointed that no one knew what Pingdu sect wanted to do. To hide it so well, it made him feel that something big was going on. Hence, he gave up on the idea of escaping and decided to continue waiting. At the same time, on the jade platform, Qi Hongchan put down his wine cup and said, There are many concerns when refining the pagoda. Because we can't activate the array of the mountain gate, the 2 elders have to follow me into the pagoda. There are no defenses inside or outside. That's why I've invited the 4 of you over. Although we've already made some defenses, due to various reasons, there are bound to be many flaws. Hence, I'd like to hear the opinions of the Taoists from Qinsong School. Although he was talking to the 4 of them, his eyes were fixed on Zhang Yan. He knew that whether it was in terms of spiritual power or status, only Hall Master Duzhen was the one who was truly in charge. Zhang Yan said plainly, There's no need for any arrangements. If the enemy comes with I and the others here, we can handle it. Before this, he had already discussed with Sect Master Qin about the possible situations that could happen. This was not a battle of life and death, and the 4 of them could handle it. Moreover, although no one from Huanjin Temple came this time, they had already hung the demon subduing mirrors on top of the sky. Once it shone down, all the demons would have nowhere to hide. If there were any unexpected changes, it would only appear on the pagoda of Pingdu sect. Qi Hongchan was slightly stunned, then he nodded and smiled. With Zhenren Zhang's words, I'm relieved. Afterward, he only cared about toasting and did not mention this matter anymore. It was considered a joyous occasion for both the host and the guest. After the banquet ended, there were Pingdu sect disciples who sent the elixir jade that Qi Hongchan had promised earlier to them. Zhang and the rest did not stand on ceremony and accepted it. Then, they meditated and adjusted their qi circulation, and did not bother about the outside world. Another day passed. Pingdu sect sent out an order for all disciples to guard the altar. They were not allowed to leave the altar without the order. Although they did not understand what the high sect wanted to do, no one dared to disobey the order. They all went to their respective altars and sat down. Sima Quan also followed a boy to an altar and sat down. He sensed around and noticed that there were strange movements in a few directions. After paying a little attention, he knew that there were disciples of the devil's doctrine who had also sneaked in. He sneered to himself and said, I knew that this person would also come here. Just as he was thinking about it, his gaze suddenly focused. He suddenly realized that the protective mountain formation was slowly opening. It gradually dissipated like smoke, revealing the scenery outside. He was very surprised and could not figure out what the Pingdu sect was trying to do. At this moment, there was a feeling that made his heart palpitate coming from the top of the sky. Instantly, his expression changed. However, before he could react, 2 majestic white lights, one from the south and one from the north, intertwined and shrouded the landscape. In just an instant, within a radius of tens of thousands of miles, all the demons and disciples of the devil's doctrine, regardless of their cultivation, turned into ashes. Not a single trace of them remained in the world. Chapter 1125. The descent of this ray of light had alarmed the cultivators of the various sects that had come to attend the meeting. Because they didn't know the inside story, they couldn't help but feel slightly panicked and uneasy. However, the sect had already separated every single one of them and strictly ordered them not to leave the altar, so they couldn't even find someone to discuss with. At this moment, they could only sit still. A beam of light flew out from the white jade platform. It was a Yuanying elder from Pingdu sect. He looked down, bowed, and said loudly, "Fellow Taoists, don't panic. Just now, fellow Taoists from Huanzhen Temple used the demon-subduing technique to kill the Witch Dao sect disciples who snuck in. It didn't cause any harm to the cultivators of Xianying sect. Please guard the altar and look after the restrictions. No one is allowed to leave without permission. Those who disobey will be punished." Hearing this, everyone was relieved. After Sima Quan's clone was destroyed, he woke up from the cauldron. He sensed around and found that all the demons around were gone. He was in a bad mood and thought to himself, "I was too careless. I didn't expect Huanzhen Temple to bring out the demon-subduing twin mirrors. Even if I go to investigate, I'll still be exposed. I can only investigate from outside. If there really is a mystery, then I'll see if there's a chance to act." After thinking for a while, he blew out a mouthful of black qi, which turned into a qi mirror. The mirror shook, and the current situation in Pingdu sect was displayed. Xuema sect, ancient spring stage. Wen Qingxiang's heart suddenly palpitated. He opened his eyes and waved his sleeve, bringing up a puff of smoke. A landscape appeared in the pool in front of him. Just now, when Huanzhen Temple's demon-subduing twin mirrors appeared, he sensed it. Xuema sect had many spies in Pingdu sect, but when the mirror shone, all the disciples of the Devil Dao sect and the demons were wiped out. Not a single one was left, not even their souls escaped. Many of them were Pingdu disciples who were controlled by the Devil Dao sect's secret techniques. These people either died on the spot or fainted on the ground. They were quickly dragged away by the cultivators of Pingdu sect. He thought, Pingdu sect has such a big lineup. They even invited 4 enlightened masters from Qinsong school. I'm afraid it's not just to wipe out the spies in the sect. Because there was no mountain protecting Grand Array. He easily sent his divine will over and observed every movement in the door. Very quickly, he realized that the Pingdu sect master and the sect elders were nowhere to be seen. With a thought, his gaze focused on the hidden Dharma pagoda. On the white jade platform, Zhang Yan sat on the north side. Shen Baishuang, Qin Yu, and Yan Gongzhen each guarded a direction. At this moment, he was able to sense that many gazes had descended here, and all of them were observing the situation here. He raised his head and looked back in the direction from which the man had come. Most people collided with his gaze and immediately felt the incomparably sharp divine will, causing their hearts to tremble. They unconsciously restrained their auras and didn't dare to look around so fearlessly. When Wen Qingxiang's gaze met hers, he leaned back slightly and unconsciously avoided her gaze. He pondered for a moment. With a point of his finger, he condensed several letters and pointed at each letter. Each letter was left with a blood-red mark, and with a wave of his sleeves, he sent them all out. Not long after, tens of thousands of feet below Mount Kunsher, the jade lamp niches on the altar flashed one after another. Not long after, the perfected masters of the 6 demonic sects all arrived. Netherworld Spring Sect perfectedly said, "Why is Perfected One in such a hurry to use the Scarlet Talisman to invite us here?" Hanqing Sect Perfected Huan said, "Is it about Pingdu Sect?" Wen Qingxiang said, "Yes." Perfected Wei asked curiously, "Perfected Wen, do you know something?" Wen Qingxiang shook his head and said, "I don't know yet, but Pingdu Sect actually invited the demon-subduing twin mirrors to kill our disciples. What's coming is very likely to be disadvantageous to us, so we have to be prepared." Perfected Lu of Jiuling Sect said coldly, "Things that haven't been sorted out. Perfected When used the Scarlet Talisman and alerted all of you. Isn't it inappropriate?" Wen Qingxiang said seriously, "I don't have any selfish motives in this matter. Everyone, the tribulation is coming, and every move of Shenmen must not be taken lightly. Let's take a step back and say that I'm wrong. Pingdu Sect and Huanzhen Temple are on the same side, and they will inevitably be a threat to me in the future. Now that they have even removed the mountain gate formation, it's a great opportunity. Should we just ignore it and let him pass so easily? Perfected Huan smiled and said, Perfected One, you're right about one thing. If we can ruin his plans, it's not without benefits for me. Lu Zhenren said, Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but right now, the Jade Cloud sect is fighting with the Black Tsong sect, and the Pingdu sect is an ally of the Black Tsong sect. Even if we don't make a move, the Jade Cloud sect won't just sit back and watch. Why should we go in first and work for others? It's better to watch the situation from the side and then talk about other things. The few perfected ones next to him nodded. Even if they really went up to stop them, it would not be a simple matter of a few words. With Yuxiao School in front of them, he didn't want to fall out with Qinsong School and draw the fire to himself for no reason. When Qingxiang sighed and said, What if Yuxiao School thinks the same? Moreover, they are both Xian men, and they may not really do anything until the last moment. I'm afraid that it will be beyond their power to make a move at that time. Perfectedly said in a deep voice. What Perfected One said makes some sense, but there's really no need to be anxious now. Pingdu sect has made a big move this time, and it's definitely not something that can be done in one go. Let's see what they want to do first, and then discuss what to do. Inside the Xinming cave of the Imperial Department of Yuxiao School, Zhou Ruiying sat in front of a dressing table and was talking to a shadow through a mirror. Pingdu sect just now borrowed the demon-subduing mirrors to kill dozens of Devil's Doctrine disciples who sneaked into their sect, but I don't know what they want to do. The shadow said, Since Pingdu sect first cleaned up the Devil's Doctrine disciples, then this matter must be related to the Devil's Doctrine. Zhou Ruiying thought for a moment and suddenly said, Senior brother, if this matter is targeted at Yuxiao School, what should we do? If this was just Pingdu sect's own action, no matter how big the movement was, as long as it did not threaten Yuxiao School, she would only look on coldly from the side. But this time, for people from Qinsong School went to Pingdu sect, and she felt that this matter was not simple. Qinsong School could help Tao Zhenhong and the others to set up a formation in the South Sea. Who knew if they would do the same in other places? The shadow thought for a moment and said, The situation is unclear, it's better to wait and see. Zhou Ruiying thought for a moment and said, All right. Let's listen to senior brother first. Qi Hongchan was already inside the pagoda. He threw a talisman to Zhenren Zhao and Zhenren Wu and said, Fellow Taoist from Huanzhen Temple, help me get rid of the internal trouble. Fellow Taoist from Qinsong School will keep watch outside, and I will try my best to refine the pagoda later. At that time, I won't be able to care about anything else. If there are any abnormalities, or if it endangers others, you can use this talisman to protect the disciples in the pagoda. Taoist Master Zhao heard the danger in his words and hurriedly said, Sect leader, did you sense something? Qi Hongchan smiled and said, Just in case, Zhenren Zhao, don't worry. As long as fellow Taoist from Qinsong School can handle it. I'm more than 90% sure. Zhenren Zhao was slightly relieved and said, I only hope that after this, Pingdu sect will prosper and be passed down for generations to come. Zhenren Wu also said, The rise and fall of Pingdu is tied to sect master, please be careful, sect master. Qi Hongchan solemnly nodded and said, All right, Zhenren, please return to your seats. Zhenren Zhao and Zhenren Wu bowed to him and turned into a ray of light, flying into the shrine seats. Qi Hongchan looked up. His body turned into a ray of light, and he also sat down in the main seat. At this moment, in the hidden aspect pagoda, the 365 Dharma spirits had returned. In particular, there were 3 Taoist grotto heavens among them, causing the pagoda to tremble slightly. Light shone outside, auspicious rainbows scattered, and clear music rang out in the air. Qi Hongchan sat for a long time, and a bead gradually flew out from between his brows, piercing through the pagoda and heading straight for the sky. In just a short while, it floated motionlessly under the high clouds. At this moment, Qi Hongchan sensed that there was a trace of connection between him and the bead. So he used his magic power to activate the bead. In just a short while, the bead was controlled and slowly turned. In a short while, 2 rays of light, one yin and one yang, tore apart the high clouds and shot down from above, gathering in the bead. As the essence gradually increased, the bead became brighter and brighter, and it slowly sank. The direction it was heading towards was the top of the pagoda. The people in the surroundings who did not know what was going on thought that Pingdu Hai sect was working together to refine a treasure, but those with good eyesight could immediately see that the bead was definitely related to the hidden aspect spiritual pagoda. Zhang Yan glanced over and said, looking at the situation of the bead's descent, if there are no changes, it can be refined with the hidden aspect pagoda after 10 days. This is not much different from what sect Master Qi said before. He looked at the three of them and said, if there is an enemy, it will be 3 or 4 days later at the earliest. Jinren, you three need to be careful. Shenbai Shuang and the other two nodded in understanding. On the altar of Mount Kunshe, Jinren Li saw this and snorted. So it's because of this. He looked at Wen Qingxiang. No wonder Jinren Wen insisted on calling us here. It turns out that you had already expected this to be related to the hidden aspect pagoda. Wen Qingxiang made a Dao salute and said, I was just guessing. Jinren Wei frowned and said, what is going on? This hidden aspect pagoda is the Dharma treasure of the Pingdu sect. Could it be that they want to do something to it? Jinren Li pondered for a while and said, you may not know this, but this hidden aspect pagoda already existed in the world long before the cultivators of the West continent came east. Because no one could see through it, they could not touch it. Later, the founder of the Pingdu sect, Jinren Tafeng, somehow entered the pagoda and it was stolen. Our ancestors once said that this pagoda had long been damaged, as if it was missing something from the pagoda, so it was not complete. Looking at it today, this thing must have been found by the Pingdu sect, and they want to refine it in one go. The hearts of those who heard those words trembled. One had to know that when the Western continent was at its peak, this realm allowed ordinary cultivators to roam freely. If even they could not see through this spiritual pagoda, it could be imagined that this pagoda had far exceeded their understanding. After all, the celestial sect of wonders was a great enemy of the spiritual sect. If it was so easily refined by the Pingdu sect, who knew what would happen next? The 6 sects of the devil's doctrine had been suppressed by the Xian men for tens of thousands of years, and they were extremely sensitive to things that could threaten them. Jinren Huan's eyes turned fierce and he said, we must find a way to stop them. The Xuanmen's foundation is already above mine. If they have this treasure, once a fight breaks out, I will have no chance of winning. Jinren Wei said, what do we need to do? Qinsong School has 4 Jinren guarding it. Even without the mountain gate formation, we are not afraid of any devil qi erosion, unless we really fight our way up. Seeing Wen Qingxiang's calm expression, Jinren Li said, Jinren Wen, do you have a countermeasure? Wen Qingxiang bowed and said, I have a foolish idea. Everyone can see that to refine the pagoda, we need to receive the light of the sun and the moon. The first feasible plan is to cover the sky and cut off the essence of the sun and the moon. Jinren Lu said in a low voice, since the Pingdu sect dares to do this, they will not be unprepared. Jinren Wen, do you have any other plan? Wen Qingxiang said, there is another way, and that is to disturb the spiritual opportunity of heaven and earth. Jinren Gai of the skeleton sect shook his head and said, this is more difficult to do. It was not difficult to disturb the spiritual opportunity of heaven and earth, but it was difficult to do so in a place where there were people from the Dongtian sect. But if they cast a spell near the gate of the Pingdu sect, it was no different from fighting their way up. At the moment, they did not want to shed all pretenses of cordiality so quickly. Even if they used a method, they could only do it secretly and could not do it too much. When Qingxiang raised his hand and drew a line in the air in front of him, a white smoke flashed and a scene appeared. It was the mountain gate of the Pingdu sect. He said, everyone, please take a look. The Pingdu sect is located in the southwest of Donghua. This area is crisscrossed with ravines, countless sinkholes, and countless small spiritual caves. We have long suspected that Sima Quan was hiding here. Since there is such a natural place, why not make use of it? Jinren Lu said, what do you want, Jinren Wen? Why don't you tell us? When Qingxiang pointed and said, during the meeting at the PG Palace, I have already agreed with Xianmen that the last spiritual cave belongs to Xianmen, and Xianmen will not interfere again. But what if it appears here now? Jinren Wei's eyes brightened and said, Jinren Wen, you mean to deliberately create a false cave? Wen Qingxiang smiled and said, yes, after creating a false cave, it will not be difficult to disturb the spiritual vigor. We can even use this as an excuse to investigate. As long as we have this reason, even Xianmen will not be able to say anything. Jinren Gai praised, this is a good idea. Jinren Lu said in a low voice, at this moment, if the Pingdu sect is not on guard, we can go over and use our method. But creating a false cave is not something that can be done in a day or two. Even if we work together, it will take at least 17 or 18 days. I am afraid that by that time, the Pingdu sect will have already refined the pagoda. Zhenren Li said, we can first take the strategy of concealing the sun and moon. As for the method of disturbing the spirits, we can do it at the same time. As for the lack of time, we can use an instrument to help. Our Nether Spring sect has a soul-examining bowl that can help. At this point, he paused for a moment and said, this is not something that can be done by any one of us. We need to work together. Everyone can go back to the mountain gate and report the situation. Tomorrow, we will come back here to discuss how to do it. Chapter 11:26. On the White Jade platform, Zhang Yan and the rest had been sitting for a day. Although there were many people who were spying on them, as long as they did not get in their way, they would let them be. However, the four of them knew that the peace would not last long. Based on the situation of the elixir pearl, it would take at most 1 or 2 days before someone could not help but make a move. Another day had passed. The elixir pearl was still absorbing the chi of vitality. It shone brightly in the night sky, as if there was another star in the sky. Zhang Yan had tried before. Once he sensed the pearl, it was blocked by an invisible force. It was no different from when he was in Donglai continent. That was enough to prove that when it was receiving the light of the sun and moon, it was not afraid of any collision of mana. If that was the case, then there was no need to pay much attention to it. Instead, he could focus on other things. In these 2 days, he seemed to be sitting still, but in reality, he had released his sword gleam. He hid the sharpness and looked up to the sky to observe the movements in the surroundings. It could be said that within a 10,000 miles radius, the flow of spiritual vigor was all within his senses. If there was any unusual movement, he would immediately notice it. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of a sword in the sky. It was obvious that there was a change in spiritual vigor. He opened his eyes and looked up. He saw that the sky was covered by dark clouds, but it was unusually hidden. If he did not pay attention, he would have missed it. His eyes flashed. From the chi dynamic, he could infer that it was a cultivator from the Devil's Doctrine. The Devil's Doctrine and Xianmen were originally enemies. However, after the PG Palace, they changed their stance to not fight for the Devil's Lair and agreed not to fight. However, if they were to pick a fight without permission, then they would be the first to be unreasonable. However, it was obvious that the other party had also thought of this. The change happened in the 9 heavens. This place was far away from the surface and was not within the Pingdu sect. Even if they were to do anything here, he would not be able to catch them. The cloud of Yin Qi reached the top of the sky. Very quickly, it blended into the night sky. Immediately, everyone realized that the chi of vitality that the elixir pearl guided from the sky had become much weaker. Zhang Yan sat with his legs crossed and said, there is too much haze in the sky, causing my chi dynamic to be blocked. Jinren Shen, please help me. Clean up the filth. Shen Baishuang understood and cupped his hands. With a slight movement of his technique, the white mist behind him shot up into the sky. The 2 balls of chi collided and the black mist was immediately dispersed. The person who came had no intention of getting entangled and saw that someone was making a move. He immediately retreated into the distance. When Qin Yu and Reverend Yen Gong saw this, they became even more vigilant. They understood that the person who came over only had ordinary dermic powers and looked like he was here to scout. The Devil's Sect's attack this time would not be so simple. Sure enough, not long after, A few more spiritual vigor came over, but it was not like just now, which blocked the sun and moon essence chi. Furthermore, if he lay there without moving, even if these people didn't make a move, they would still have to be on guard. This brought a great deal of pressure to the people below. They all looked at Zhang Yan, and Spiritual Master Yan said, "Hall Master Du Zhen, did you drive him away?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Since I didn't come up to disturb you, I'm afraid I won't disturb you." "Then don't bother about him. Everyone, just look at your own position." He was Hall Master Du Zhen, the person with the highest position here. Since he said so, the three of them could only obey and not move. This stalemate lasted for a few hours. When it was almost dawn, the few balls of chi finally couldn't hold back anymore and moved together. Each of them used their dermic powers to cover the sky and seal off the entry and exit of spiritual vigor. In an instant, the rising sun suddenly dimmed and lost all its brilliance. Dawn appeared in the sky, and in the blink of an eye, it became hazy again. Zhang Yan sneered and said, "What a good idea." It was the beginning of the morning. This was the time when the sun and moon alternated in Donghua continent, and the essence chi was at its peak. Even if he only blocked the chi for a moment, it was better than the usual accumulation of an hour. He naturally wouldn't allow the other party to mess up the chi. With a change of heart, a yellow smoke flew out and dispersed more and more. In the end, it turned into a big hand that covered a radius of 10,000 miles. Although he didn't use the 5 elements big hand this time, with his dermic powers, he only needed to cast the spell and it had the power to split the sky. Moreover, the person who came was just a wisp of chi, so it was enough to deal with. With a rumble, all the dark clouds, evil chi were scattered by his palm. The light of the rising sun was no longer obstructed. Once the bright golden light was gone, it immediately scattered over thousands of rivers and tens of thousands of mountains. After Zhang Yan's palm hit, he felt that wisps of spiritual vigor gathered around his body. Just now, he didn't use any dermic powers. He raised his eyebrows and praised in his heart, as expected of the original Xuanshu sect's treasure. The white jade platform that the 4 of them sat on was originally the Xuanshu sect's treasure. When cultivators sat on the platform, the surrounding spiritual vigor rolled over. Although their dermic powers were used up, they were immediately replenished. It was rumored that this treasure used to be 7,000 feet tall. However, until now, there was less than half of it left. This time, if it wasn't for refining the hidden Dharma pagoda, which was related to the foundation of the sect, Qi Hongchan wouldn't have let the 4 of them sit here. At this moment, at the foot of Mount Kunshe, the 6 Jinren of the Devil's Doctrine gathered together again. Zhenren Huan said, "These 4 Jinren each guard a direction. They are calm and unruffled, and their guard is very strict. Especially Hall Master Du Zhen of Qinsong School. His dermic powers are superb. It's useless to just guide the qi." Zhenren Li said, "The twin devil-subduing mirrors cover the entire Pingdu sect's mountain gate, so we can't invade it. That Dan bead seems to be a bit magical. It's impossible to move it inside or outside. Now it seems that we can only delay it for now until the false acupoint is formed." When Qingxiang looked at the Dan bead and reminded everyone, "It's already been 2 days. Pingdu sect should be refining the pagoda in about 10 days. However, we can see that Qi Hongchan might shorten the time. It's best to act a few days earlier." Zhenren Li waved his hand and said, "No problem. Let's stick to the previous plan." He turned to look at Zhenren Gai and said, "Zhenren Gai, are you ready?" Zhenren Gai nodded and said, "I'll start now." Although everyone's shadows were here, their real bodies were still in their respective mountain gates. He pointed to the sky in the cave abode, and a treasured umbrella that had long been placed in the southeast sky suddenly opened. In an instant, it became tens of thousands of feet wide, circled around, and shrouded the white jade platform. This umbrella was called the bone-bearing umbrella. It was made from the bones of millions of monsters and a few cultivators. After it was released, Yin Qi filled the sky and cut off yang and life. However, this umbrella of his was not perfect. Only the one in the hands of the head of the Bone Yin sect was the real treasure. As soon as the umbrella was opened, Zhang Yan had already sensed the yin and filthy qi enveloping over, and he immediately saw it clearly with his sword heart. His eyes flashed, and he said to a boy at the side of the platform, "Go call my disciple over." Jiang Zheng came up to the platform, bowed and said, "Greetings, master." Zhang Yan said, "Come and communicate with the starry heavenly palace." Jiang Zheng said, "Yes." He stood on the platform, took a deep breath, and used the Celestial Fire 6 Control's true technique that he had cultivated for hundreds of years. As soon as he moved, the starry heavenly palace outside the virtual sky couldn't help but shake. They resonated with each other, and there was a faint connection of spiritual vigor. Zhang Yan said, "I'll help you." He stretched out his hand and pointed between Jiang Zheng's eyebrows. The latter immediately felt his whole body swell, and there seemed to be endless mana in his body. At the same time, the yuanying in his body trembled, as if he was cultivating a dharmakaya. Old ancestor Jingcong, who was in the heavenly palace, saw it and followed the previous agreement. In an instant, layers of gangsha and heavenly fire evil qi fell from the sky, as if the heaven and earth had been penetrated by a stream of fire. The starry heavenly palace was divided into 10 halls, and each hall hid a gangsha, and each hall was stronger than the previous one. The last few halls had taken the heavenly poison fire and fierce wind. If it wasn't a true artifact, ordinary magic treasures couldn't resist it. Right at this moment, the bone-burying umbrella came over. But as soon as it got close, a layer of it was burned by the heavenly fire. Seeing this, Immortal Guy's expression didn't change, and he still drove the umbrella forward. But in this way, raging fire kept burning on the surface of the umbrella, and after a while, countless holes were burned through it. After covering the sky for a while, only the umbrella frame was still there. Immortal Guy then cast a spell and took it back. Although he retreated, another roll of belt floated over and also covered the top. But it didn't last long before it retreated. In just 2 hours, 5 or 6 magic treasures were sent into the air, including spiritual weapons, magical weapons, and even a magical item. His intention was very obvious. He couldn't cover the sky for a long time, but he could keep disturbing him. In short, he couldn't let him use the elixir bead in peace. Seeing this, Qin Yu frowned and asked, "Hall Master Duzhen, why didn't you stop it?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "These are just small disturbances. Sect Master Qi can handle them." With the Jiaoyi Pearl in Pingdu Sect's hands, even if the Devil Sect kept disturbing them for a day and a night, it wouldn't be a big deal. If there was really something wrong, they would have sent him a telepathic message. This meant that it was within their acceptable range. As for Qi Hongchan saying that he would use the Jiaoyi Pearl at the end to hide from the Devil Sect, that was just an idea. If they really fought, it wouldn't be possible for everything to go according to their own ideas. They had to constantly change their strategy according to the specific situation. 2 hours passed quickly. Seeing that it was already past the hour, the people from the Devil Sect stopped. It wasn't worth it to continue. Immortal Huan stared at the white jade platform and said, "This Hall Master Duzhen is really bold. He actually used the power to let his own disciple achieve the Yuanying Dharmakaya." Immortal Lu said in a low voice, "That thing in the sky is the startling heavenly palace of Pingyuan Sect. Can you think of a way to disrupt the source?" Immortal Wei shook his head and said, "This is a real treasure. If we want to use it, we also need to use a real treasure to attack it. It's easy to attack but hard to stop. We haven't reached that point yet." Everyone could hear the resistance in her words, but the others were actually not willing to do so. Their sects couldn't compare to Qinsong School's wealth. Besides, if they really fought, there would be no way to clean up the mess. Qin Yu was the daughter of Qin Qingang, the previous hall master of Qinsong School, and Shen Baishuang was the disciple of Zhui Yuming, the previous hall master of Duzhen. Who knew what powerful treasures these two ascended immortals left for their disciples? Moreover, there were still the demon-subduing mirrors in the sky. Qinsong School had 10 grotto heavens watching from the mountain gate. If they went up to fight, no matter how you looked at it, they would suffer more losses. When Qingxiang knew in his heart that if there was no backup plan, they might be able to fight with all their might. But now that they had the pseudo-acupoint as their retreat route, they naturally did not want to take the risk. He sighed and kept silent. Chapter 1127. Inside Yuxiao School, Zhou Ruiying watched as the fire fell from the sky towards the southeast. Many demonic treasures tried to stop it, but they were all burned. Zhou Ruiying couldn't help but mock. I thought the demonic sect could do something, but it turns out they only have this little trick. Centpound. The image in the mirror said, that's not all. Looking at their actions, they still have something up their sleeves. Zhou Ruiying frowned, but if they can't stop it, won't they be helping Pingdu sect? The image laughed. This pagoda of hidden appearance is not simple, but it is not a killing treasure either. Even if they can cultivate it, with Qi Hongchan's mana, he may not be able to control it. Zhou Ruiying gritted her teeth and said, the Yutsong sect has made me lose face in front of my fellow disciples time and time again. This time, we clearly have a chance, but I'm not willing to just sit back and watch. The image thought for a while and said, then we can only bear with it for now. Hall Master Yu Pai brought the treasure to Yuanyang sect to visit sect Master Chu, hoping to win him over. Until now, there has been no result. Pingdu, Qinsong, this is a battle between demonic sections. We Yuxiao are from Shenmen. If we hit them when they are down and make them suspicious, it will not be good for the overall situation. Zhou Ruiying sneered. Yuanyang sect has never been on good terms with any sect for thousands of years. How can they be moved by a few words? Yuanyang sect's sect Master Chu Rui had already cultivated his nascent embryo. At this stage, he could already control the situation. This was a force not to be underestimated, but he had the strength to not give face to any sect. The figure said, that was in the past, but it's different now. Not long ago, when their disciple Qiao Jingdao was circulating his technique, his mana leaked out and shook the golden bell in the sect. It's very likely that this sect will have another Taoist abode. Especially since this person did not rely on the same cultivation method, but just like Chu Rui, he cultivated with his own ability. Once this person succeeds, Yuanyang sect's strength will increase greatly. If I can form an alliance with him, it will be of great help to me. Even if I can't get what I want, I can't let him side with the Qinsong. At this time, I can't give him an excuse to refuse. When Zhou Ruiying heard this, he couldn't accept it anymore. He could only restrain his temper. She usually only took care of the mundane affairs of the sect. She was powerless when it came to matters that involved the layout of the sect, so she could only stand by the side. In the sky above Pingdu sect's mountain gate, the Devil sect would definitely launch an attack every 2 hours to prevent Danju from collecting the sun and moon's spiritual essence. However, as long as this group of people did not use their mana to cover the sky, they would not be able to escape. Zhang Yan and the others only drove him away and didn't take any further action. On the other hand, the cultivators below had their horizons broadened. Previously, they only knew that the heaven and earth dwellers had supernatural powers and every move they made could shake the world and change the weather. However, now that they saw it with their own eyes and felt the power that shook the world, they realized just now that words were useless. Another 2 days passed. At the foot of Mount Kunshe, there was silence. Spiritual Master Huan's expression changed and he said, "Esteemed masters, although it's rather hasty, my disciple has already found a place in the southwest that's filled with spiritual opportunity. It can be used to create the false cave. However, in order to prevent the heaven and earth dwellers from Qinsong School from noticing that something was wrong, the location is rather remote, at least 10,000 miles away from Pingdu sect." Jinrenli said in a deep voice, "It's fine. As long as we go there and work together, we can stir up all the spiritual opportunity in the southwest. Without further ado, I'll order someone to send the treasure bowl over." He turned his head again and said, "Jinren Wei, I'll have to trouble your Yuan Mirage sect to set up the next stage. The Yuan Mirage sect's illusion technique could pass off the fake as the real, especially the weather that could change between the real and the fake. No matter how high one's cultivation was, it would be difficult to see through the flaws in a short period of time. Hundreds of years ago, the Devil sect had made 3 fake spirit caves at the same time, making it difficult for the Taoists to distinguish them. This was partly due to the eating sect. Jinren Wei nodded and said, "I'll do it now." Jinren Li looked left and right, then looked at Wen Qingxiang and said politely, "Jinren Wen, do you think there are any omissions?" Wen Qingxiang thought for a moment. This countermeasure was originally proposed by him, but now that it had come to this, he could only sit and watch the situation develop. However, he still reminded, it's easy to set up an illusion, and it's not difficult to hide from the senses of peers, but people's hearts may not be able to block it. Once we make the spirit cave, we must act immediately and do our best to disturb the spiritual opportunity here. We can't hesitate, otherwise it's very likely to ruin things. Jinren Li thought of how Zhang Yan had shattered the contract with one hand in PG Palace, and his heart trembled. He said, Jinren Wen is right. The behavior of the Qinsong School's Hall Master Duzhen can't be judged by common sense. There may indeed be many variables. He said seriously, once it's activated, the spiritual opportunity below will rush to the surface. At that time, everyone must reach that boundary. Even if the Qinsong School senses something is wrong, it's impossible for them to abandon Pingdu. Even if there are people coming, there should only be one or two. With the strength of the 6 of us, it's enough to block them outside. It only takes 2 hours to disturb the spiritual opportunity in the southeast. At that time, everyone can retreat. Everyone nodded in agreement. Except for Wen Qingxiang, everyone's real bodies came out of the door. They used the instruments to conceal their qi and headed to the boundary where they were going to make the fake cave. It wasn't that Wen Qingxiang didn't want to act, but that the Xueshua sect was surrounded by the altar of the Qinsong School. Once he came out, it was very likely that the Qinsong School would find out. To prevent the secret from being leaked, he could only sit still. However, it wasn't that he had nothing to do. He needed to preside over the 4 hours of daily harassment. At this moment, in the southeast ravine, Hui Xiao hurried into the cave hall and said, "Teacher, just now, the sect has sent a report that there are disciples of the Devil's Doctrine stationed not far away. They're less than 1,000 miles away from me." Sima Quan grunted. Because he had lost a doppelganger, he was currently cultivating and recovering. Even if his spirit went out, it would only be in the direction of Pingdu sect. During this period of time, he had neglected the defenses here. When he heard this, he immediately became vigilant. To a cultivator, 1,000 miles was nothing more than a blink of an eye. He immediately ordered the demons that were scattered all around to scout out. After a search, he indeed saw a few cultivators of the Devil's Doctrine, and they were setting up formation flags and instruments everywhere. He thought to himself, what are they doing? Could it be that they're planning to stay here while Pingdu sect is busy? Just as he was thinking, he suddenly sensed a few strong spiritual vigor coming. All of them were cultivators of the Devil's Doctrine Grotto Heaven. Even he was shocked. He carefully hid his chi dynamic to avoid being discovered. The 5 people that came sat in a circle. A jade bowl flew into the sky, and in a short while he felt the spiritual vigor of the earth's veins all around seem to be attracted, and all of it gathered below him. Sima Quan, that demon, could not withstand such a torrent of spiritual vigor. He was sucked into it, and in less than half a breath, he was completely crushed. Sima Quan had lost his demon head, so naturally he could no longer peek. He only needed to ponder for a while before he guessed his purpose. This is to gather spiritual vigor and create a virtual cave. So it's also for the Pingdu sect. If it was somewhere else, he would be very happy to see this group of people do this, but this void cave was really too close to where he was entrenched. No matter which side won later, this cave was very likely to be exposed in front of others. It was not luck that he was able to escape from the cultivators of the Black and Devil families time and time again. He said decisively, Hui Xiao, this place is no longer safe. Immediately take the disciples and leave this place. Go hide at the place that I told you before. Hui Xiao heard his tone and knew that danger was approaching. She did not dare to ask any more questions. She agreed and hurriedly went to make arrangements. Sima Quan's eyes were gloomy. As a skyscraping devil, he had the ability to sneak into the souls of the cultivators of the Devil Doctrine and temporarily lay dormant. As long as there was an opportunity, he could slowly replace them without anyone noticing. Although it was dangerous now, it might also be an opportunity for him. On the white jade platform, as Zhang Yan was sitting on guard, he suddenly felt the sky and earth shake in the southwest direction. There was a loud noise coming from thousands of miles away. He turned to look and saw a ray of spiritual light soaring into the sky like a rainbow. At the same time, the surrounding mountains and rivers trembled with great momentum. When Jinren Yen saw this, he said in surprise, "The Devil's Cave has appeared?" There was a hint of playfulness in his eyes. What a coincidence! Qin Yufeng's eyes turned cold, and she said with hatred, "It must be the devil doctrine's doing again." Shen Baishuang thought for a while and said, "Once the Devil's Cave has appeared, the pure and turbid qis will clash with each other. Whether it's real or fake, if we let it go, it will definitely cause chaos in the spiritual opportunity. This is not the most important thing. If the cultivators of the six main devil doctrine arrive and take advantage of the situation to create chaos, it will be difficult for Pingdu sect's fellow cultivators to refine the pagoda in peace." As soon as he finished speaking, he noticed that there were several more qis in that direction. He could not help but sneer and say, "As expected, they had a plan." Zhang Yan snorted coldly and stood up. He said, "3 Jinren, please guard here. I will go and take care of this matter." Shen Baishuang said, "What is Hall Master Du Jin going to do?" Zhang Yan said, "Of course I'm going to destroy the Devil's Cave." Jinren Yen said, "How can we determine whether the Spirit's Cave is real or fake? You must know that our Black and Devil sects have an agreement. If it's real, there will be no more fighting." Zhang Yan said lightly, "If I can't suppress it, it will be true. If I can suppress it, it will be fake." He glanced at Jiang Zheng, took out a talisman, and pressed it on his forehead. He said, "You can focus on refining the Dharmakaya. Don't worry about the outside world. This talisman will protect you." After saying that, he turned into a clear light and flew into the sky, heading toward the place where the spiritual light was. His speed was extremely fast, and he arrived at the place in a flash. At this time, a yellow light flew out from below, and a Taoist appeared, blocking his way. Jinren Li cupped his hands and said, "Jinren Zhang, please wait. In front of us is the territory of our Ling sect." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and said, "This is under the rule of Pingdu sect. When did it become the territory of your Ling sect?" Jinren Li said, "According to the agreement between our Black and Devil sects, if the Spirit's Cave appears again, it will be taken over by our Ling sect. Xian Men will no longer interfere in the fight." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "If it's the true Spirit's Cave, that would be the case. But right now, we haven't determined whether it's real or fake. It's too early for you to say that." Jinren Li said, "Whether it's real or not, our Ling sect will verify it. If it's fake, we will leave. Jinren Zhang, you don't have to worry about it." A cold light flashed in Zhang Yan's eyes. He said, "Since we haven't determined whether it's real or fake, it's still the territory of Pingdu sect. If you don't give way, I will have to offend you." Chapter 11:28. Hearing Zhang Yan's words, Jinren Li was shocked, but he immediately calmed down and said meaningfully, "Jinren, you must be joking. If we fight here, do you want the Southwest to collapse and the entire Donghua continent to be overturned?" In his eyes, Zhang Yan's behavior was different from that of ordinary cultivators. Others did not dare to make a move, but it might not be the case when it came to this person. However, there was one thing he was sure of. As long as they fought, it would not be as simple as affecting the Southwest. All the Jinren in the world would not sit back and watch. They would definitely stop them. Thus, he was very certain. Zhang Yan looked over and said in surprise, "Are you threatening I with the safety of the continent?" Jinren Li said, "I dare not. I came here to verify the authenticity of the Spirit Cave. I have no intention of opposing your sect. Jinren, you might as well wait a little. It will only take 2 hours. No matter what the result is, I will give you an explanation." As the two of them conversed, many gazes looked over from the outside. At this moment, there were people from the mysterious Demon 6 heavenly caves gathered here. Not to mention that there were 6 other Jinren in the Pingdu sect thousands of miles away. It could be said that if any one of them turned hostile and made a move, it could cause a disaster. They had to take it seriously. Although Zhou Ruiying could not hear what the two were talking about, it was not difficult for her to guess the reason. She looked around and asked, "Senior brother, do you think Zhang Yan dares to make a move?" Hua Ying said with certainty, "He definitely won't make a move. This is a crime against the world. If he really does this, not only will the people in the world not be able to bear it, but even sect leader Qin of Qinsong School will not let him do this. This time, it is very likely that they are just using force to deter him." Zhou Ruiying sneered and said, "Zhang Yan is the Lord of Duzhen of Qinsong School. If he can't solve this matter, Pingdu sect will not be able to refine the magic treasure. Not only will he lose face, but Qinsong School's reputation will also be greatly damaged." In Bu Tian Pavilion, sect leader Tan Dingxian was looking at the situation through a well window, sneering from time to time. Bu Jingsu asked, "Martial brother, is that the true spirit cave?" Tan Dingxian said, "It doesn't matter whether it's a Junling cave or not. What matters is whether it's a fake or not. The only way is to go in and check. The 5 people from the Devil's Doctrine are blocking the way. If Zhang Yan wants to rush in, he will have to use all his strength. But if he does that, he will ruin the Donghua continent, and most of the blame will fall on him. At that time, no one will let him go. He definitely won't dare to do that." Bu Jingsu made some deductions. He said, "The Devil sect only needs to hold on for more than an hour before the spiritual opportunity will be disrupted. It seems like the Devil sect has won this round." Tan Dingxian mocked, "This is Qinsong School's own doing. Who can you blame?" Zhang Yan had shattered the contract within the Pai Ji Palace, and had greatly shredded the heaven-mending pavilion's face. He had almost become a laughingstock, and his own mountain gate had almost fallen from the sky because of the Dark Azure sect's actions. Now that he was able to personally see them suffer a setback, he felt extremely happy in his heart. Bu Jingsu couldn't help but sigh. Qinsong School might have lost face this time. But after all, they were all from the Xianmen sect. Thinking of the Devil sect scheme, he also felt uncomfortable. At this moment, it was not only the 2 of them who thought that Zhang Yan would definitely lose this time. Even most of the cultivators watching the battle thought the same. Donghua continent was the foundation of all true cultivators. Whoever dared to destroy the continent would be the enemy of the world. Even when Jinren Ru Huang wreaked havoc and was extremely crazy, he did not do such a thing. In front of the spirit cave, Zhang Yan saw that Jinren Li was determined not to retreat, so he didn't waste his breath. With a thought, boundless profound energy gushed out from his back. Jinren Li was shocked. He never thought that Zhang Yan would make a move just like that. Just now, there was no fighting distance between the two. At this moment, even if he wanted to hide, it was too late. With a turn of his mana, a Styx flew out from his body, wrapping around him to protect him. At the same time, he also retreated. Rumble. His body shook, and he was blasted flying far into the distance. Just this strike alone caused his body to tremble. Waves of chi spread out, and the slightly taller mountains around them shattered and collapsed. The place where the 2 people's mana collided was instantly razed to the ground. Zhou Ru suddenly stood up and said in shock, "How dare he do this?" The shadow was silent for a moment and said, "Junior sister, don't be surprised. Just now, that blow seems to be very powerful, but it only shook 100 miles of mountains and rivers. He still held back a lot." Seeing this scene, all the true cultivators in the world were also nervous. Just now, if they were just watching the show, now they felt that it was a little inappropriate. When Qingxiang also looked solemn, and his heart was full of doubts. He thought to himself, "This person dares to do this, is he not afraid that the people in the world will find trouble with him?" Donghua continent collapsed, and the true cultivators lost their place of cultivation, but how could they let him go after that? Unless Zhang Yan didn't care about his own life, why would he do this? He vaguely felt that the scene in front of him was a little familiar. Suddenly, an idea flashed in his mind. He raised his head and said, "Everyone, when he makes his move later, we must not back down. The real bodies of the 5 people were in the southeast, but the light and shadow were all in Mount Kunsher. Immediately, someone asked, "What does this mean?" When Qingxiang immediately gave the answer, "Just now, what Zhang Yan is doing is to let the people in the world see it. Just like when he fought against 8 people in the Devil's Cave, forcing Jinren Huan to come out and stop him. This is just to create momentum, to make people think that he has no scruples, but in fact, he is hoping that someone will stop him. As long as we have the slightest intention to back down, the Shen men will definitely force us to give up in order to avoid the disaster of the continent." Everyone suddenly understood. Jinren Gai snorted and said, "I see. What a good plan." Jinren Lu said in a deep voice, "Since we know his plan, we can't let him succeed." Everyone agreed. They understood that at this time, they couldn't retreat, but they had to be tough. Zhang Yan forced the other party to retreat with one blow. Immediately, he shook his sleeves and rushed into the spirit cave. Halfway there, he suddenly saw 4 beams of light flying out from below, each standing in a corner and surrounding him. At this time, Jinren Li also turned around, stepping on yellow smoke and standing in the clouds. In his expression, there was a look of fear. Zhang Yan glanced around, his eyes flashing, and said, "If you retreat now, I won't pursue it. If you don't retreat, I won't hold back anymore. That's all I have to say. Don't make a mistake." Shinren Gai said, "Shinren Zhang, why are you so aggressive? This spirit cave was originally given to us by your Shenmen, but you are so unreasonable. Don't you think it's too overbearing for us to bend our knees?" Jinren Lu also said with a gloomy face, "This spirit cave is related to the prosperity of the spiritual sect. Extraordinary, the 5 of us can only join hands to fight the enemy. Even if Jinren Zhang's mana is powerful, do you think you can defeat us together?" Zhang Yan knew that the longer he delayed here, the more advantageous it would be for the Devil's sect. These people could delay for as long as they could. As long as he didn't make a move, they wouldn't take the initiative to fight with him. Therefore, he didn't want to talk more. His mana circulated, and the qi in his body rolled in all directions. The 5 of them spoke tough, but in the Donghua continent, they had scruples and didn't dare to release their dharma, so their reactions were different. Jinren Wei and Jinren Huan had tested the power of Zhang Yan's illusion in the great spiritual steel and knew that his mana was strong. Instead of blocking, they retreated. Just now, Jinren Li had suffered a loss. He also cherished his body. With a muffled snort, his body turned into a wisp of yellow smoke and fled in an instant. Only Jinren Lu and Jinren Gai didn't know his true strength. As soon as they came into contact, they felt that the mana was overlapping and surging over like a landslide. The blocking mana immediately collapsed, and they could only use their supernatural powers to dodge. Jinren Lu fell back, and a spirit flag suddenly appeared behind him. His entire body disappeared into it and then floated away with the wind. Jinren Gai took out a spell, and a cloud of black smoke flew out from the top of his head. The body that was left in place was immediately smashed by the surging qi, and the smoke hid in the sky. With a flash, his whole body came out again. He didn't seem to be injured at all. Zhang Yan seemed to have expected such a situation. After forcing the 5 of them to retreat, he took a step and instantly fled. When he appeared again, he was already above the spiritual light. Lowering his head to take a look, he saw that there was a restriction below that protected the entire spirit cave, and there was a flag fluttering in the middle of the cave's crack. It looked to be only 100 feet in size, but there were clumps of fire-like black gas spiraling around it. With just a simple glance, he had already recognized that it was undoubtedly a defensive treasure. In his senses, it seemed to be echoing with the restriction, drawing the spiritual vigor below. With a flick of his sleeves, dense Xianming heavy water flew down and smashed above. However, the flag rolled up and kept it. Although his attack didn't work, his expression didn't change. With another flick of his finger, countless small 5 elements demon-slaying divine lightning jumped out, but they were wrapped by the black smoke on the flag and disappeared without a trace. He thought to himself, it really isn't that simple. With just these 2 moves, he had already tested it out. When the 2 of them combined, they had already formed a rough formation, and the flag had coincidentally become the treasure that stabilized the formation. Even if he used the true killing sword, he would not be able to break it in a hurry unless he could destroy it in one strike. However, if he did that, it was extremely likely that it would affect the continent. At this moment, there was a flash of light behind him. It was the 5 people who had surrounded him. Zhang Yan snorted coldly. If these people didn't have the intention to cherish their spiritual power and used all their means, they might be able to compete with him. Now that they didn't dare to go all out, and they didn't have the killing true sword, they were no threat to him. Although he thought so, the people from the Devil's sect didn't think so. It wasn't easy for them to cultivate. If they used up too much of their qi, it might cause their cultivation to be stagnant for decades. Since they had the guarding true weapon to protect the false spirit cave, as long as they didn't let Zhang Yan break the flag, it would be enough. There was no need for them to risk their lives. Zhang Yan just raised his hand and took out the 5 elements escape technique. Just now, the 5 people came up, but they seemed to be locked by a strong force. Their bodies instantly tightened, and all of them couldn't move. Zhang Yan knew that almost all of them were proficient in escape techniques. Even if they were to fight, the outcome wouldn't be decided in such a short period of time. Thus, he didn't care about them, and with a leap, he turned into a light and rushed up into the sky. He stood still on top of the celestial wall and shook his shoulder. With a rumble, his Dharma form appeared. He circulated his mana in the vast Xianqi Sea. After a while, wisps of yellow smoke gathered and gradually condensed into a large hand. In just a moment, the surge of mana had already caused a drastic change in the weather. Bolts of lightning flickered and jumped non-stop. Such a vast and majestic wave of spiritual power made Jinren Li and the others change color. Jinren Wei was nervous and said, "Is he going to break this spirit cave with magic?" Jinren Li's expression was solemn, and he said, "If this palm falls, it won't be as simple as breaking the spirit cave. At least half of the continent will be lost." Wen Qingxiang said in a clear voice in Mount Kunshe, "Everyone, don't panic. This is just a bluff to force outsiders to intervene and mediate. At this moment, we must not retreat." In the Yuxiao school, Zhou Ruing looked at the scene in the sky and said, "Senior brother, do you think his palm will really come down?" The figure sensed for a moment and saw that Zhang Yan's spiritual power was still gathering, so he judged, if he is allowed to hit, Donghua continent will most likely not be saved. He is just using it as a deterrent. However, even though he said that, he didn't dare to be certain when he saw Zhang Yan's appearance. On the white jade platform, Qin Yu looked at the sky and was also a little uneasy. She hesitated for a moment and then said, "Junior brother Shen, is it really appropriate for Lord Du Zhen to do this?" Shen Baishuang thought for a moment and said, "Lord Du Zhen has his own considerations." Jinren Yan said, "If there are any changes, I think Lord Jinren will not sit by and watch." Qin Yu was a little relieved and nodded. "Yes, senior brother Jinren is still here." Zhang Yan channeled his Dharma in the sky for a good half an hour. The black-yellow hand had already covered the sky, and the sky was filled with yellow smoke. No one knew how big it was. Even the Pingdu sect could only use the Jiaoyi pearl to borrow the qi of the sun and moon. It was not that the 5 people from the Devil's Doctrine did not think of going up to stop him, but before they could reach him, they were all blocked by the Xianqi. As for going up personally, just now, their figures were blocked by the 5 elements escape technique. Looking at the momentum, no one was willing to go up and take the hit. At this time, Zhang Yan had already gathered his spiritual power to a suitable level. He looked down, then raised his palm and pressed it down. With a loud bang, the gigantic hand came crashing down. Looking at the momentum, it did not hold back at all. In just a few breaths, it was already below. The expressions of the 5 people below also changed when they saw this. At this moment, they could already sense that there was no turning back in front of them. They could either dodge or fight to the death with all their might. However, this technique was launched after accumulating power, so how could it be received so easily? If they didn't handle it well, they might even lose their lives. After struggling in their hearts for a few times, they realized it was too late to dodge now. Almost at the same time, 5 rays of light flew in different directions. As soon as they left, the big hand was no longer blocked. Before anyone could react, it had fallen straight down. At this moment, even if a cultivator who had cultivated his origin embryo was here, he would not be able to stop it. Everyone could see that if this attack was successful, it would be enough to turn the continent upside down, and the Donghua continent would certainly collapse. Seeing this scene, most of the cultivators in the heavenly abode were shocked. Some even stood up and shouted angrily, "Why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you stop it?" Tan Dingxian, the head of the Bu Tian pavilion, felt his scalp tingle. He trembled all over and said, "How dare you? How dare you?" Zhou Ruiying's face turned pale. The figure also lost his usual calmness and murmured, "Crazy, crazy." At this time, there were still people hoping that Zhang Yan would stop in time. However, his face was cold, and the pressure didn't change at all, as if he had no scruples at all. With a rumble, the big yellow hand had already pressed on the spirit cave. Chapter 1129. Rex. The people of the East Hua continent's heavenly abode watched as the huge hand landed on the ground. The moment the loud sound rang out, they seemed to have already seen the continent collapsing, the earth veins cracking, and the spiritual energy dispersing. In the blink of an eye, the entire hand had blasted into the ground, and the restriction formation beneath it instantly collapsed. The flag that was protecting it also cracked in response, and it plunged deep into the ground with unstoppable force. The spiritual light that was originally soaring into the sky instantly disappeared without a trace. Everyone who saw this scene didn't look too good. The heavenly abode cultivators realized that although they had the ability to see through the heavens and the earth, they were powerless at this moment. They could only sit and watch the situation develop. After an unknown period of time, the ground began to tremble slightly. Then, there seemed to be an invisible ripple spreading outwards. Wherever it passed, whether it was the grass, trees, mountains, rocks, or ravines, everything turned into fine sand and dust. Seeing this scene, Jinren Li, who was the closest, let out a sound of surprise and stared at the depths of the spirit cave. The other 4 devil sect cultivators who had fled far away also saw some clues. They all stopped in their tracks and looked down without blinking. The range of the ripple became wider and wider, traveling for more than 1,000 miles. However, when it reached here, it seemed to be imprisoned and suddenly disappeared. There was no more movement. Everyone looked again and saw that on the ground, there was a huge bottomless pit with a radius of tens of thousands of miles. However, other than this place, it didn't affect anywhere else. The power of that palm was completely restrained within this distance. Even the 5 demon sect cultivators who were the closest only felt a gust of wind and sand around them. They all revealed expressions of shock. To be able to restrain magic power to such an extent, the person's ability to control magic power could be said to have reached the pinnacle. After exclaiming, the 5 of them all heaved a sigh of relief. It wasn't just because the continent hadn't truly shattered, but also because they were glad that they had chosen to escape in time just now instead of going up to block it. With their eyesight, they could naturally see it. With the power of Zhang Yan's attack, he could really overturn the continent with one palm. However, his ability to control magic power had already reached the realm of being able to change it at will. If he really went up to take it head-on, he would definitely be courting death. Jinren Li said in a deep voice, "Jinren Zhang's ability is not inferior to that of the deceased elder Wu of Yuxiao School." The 4 people at the side all deeply agreed. They had also witnessed Wu Riyang's battle with Tao Zhenhong and Mi Xiaonan, and the ingenious way in which Wu Riyang's dermic powers were converted made them exclaim in admiration. Comparing the two, it was hard to tell who was superior. Jinren Li thought to himself, the reason why Elder Wu can reach this level is because he has cultivated for 3,000 years and polished his skills to the point where there are no more flaws. In addition, only those who have refined the Yuan Tai can do it, but this Jinren Zhang has obviously not reached this level. I wonder how he reached this level? The reason why Zhang Yan was able to do this was because he had broken through 6 barriers in one go. Apart from the fact that he had yet to condense an origin embryo, he was able to do so. He was already infinitely close to the third stage of the elephant realm. It was precisely because of this that he dared to say that he could suppress the spirit point by himself. Not to mention that it was only a false point. Even if it was a true point before him, he was still confident in crushing it with a single palm strike. Within the heaven-mending pavilion, when Tan Dingxian saw his palm land on the ground, he was originally at a loss. When he saw that the continent was not damaged, his entire body relaxed, and he returned to his seat. After a few breaths, he managed to regain some composure. Bo Jingsu also let go of his thoughts and said, "At least the continent can be preserved. This is a fortunate event." Tan Dingxian let out a muffled grunt. He said hatefully, "We managed to avoid it this time, but Qinsong School's actions are so unscrupulous. Sooner or later, it will bring disaster to the continent." Bu Jingsu was silent. His senior brother was still thinking about how to maintain the stability of a continent, but he had long lost this thought. There would be a battle in the Donghua continent sooner or later. If not, there would never be a day of peace. Within the hall of Exen Ming in Yuxiao School, Zhou Ruiying looked at the big hole and felt a lingering fear. Even though the three major mystical sects borrowed 3 continents from the outside to activate the spirit point, there was still a portion of the spiritual opportunity that was borrowed from the Donghua continent. The structure of the 4 continents was originally one. If it was destroyed, not to mention the others, the spirit point of Yuxiao School would definitely be implicated. It was hard to say what would happen. The shadow said bitterly, "So Zhang Yan's control of mana is so smooth and smooth. No wonder no one stopped him just now. I think those few have seen it." At this moment, from the hole, 2 spiritual lights suddenly flew up. One of the banner-like lights flew into the middle of Zhenren Lu's brows. He examined it for a while, and his expression immediately darkened. The spiritual light of this treasure flag was already weak and damaged everywhere. He was sure that at least half of the attack that destroyed the continent had been unleashed on this treasure. It was already lucky that it hadn't been destroyed on the spot. After he returned, he didn't know how long it would take for it to recover. As for the other ray of light, it flew to Zhenrenli. With a flip of his palm, there was a bright and clean jade bowl in his palm. He carefully examined it and found that there was no damage on it. He unconsciously relaxed a little. Zhenrenlu said, "Since we can't do anything, then we should go back." When Qingxiang watched the whole process, and his expression changed several times. But even at this time, he still refused to give up and said, "Wait. Everyone, the outcome is not decided. We may not lose." Zhenrenli said, "What else do you have, Zhenrenwen?" When Qingxiang said in a deep voice that Zhenren Zhang must have used all his strength in that blow. "The 5 of us are above, and he won't come up for a while. This is an opportunity." In the eyes of the 5 people, although when Qingxiang's judgment was wrong, it was Zhang Yan who broke the situation with force. He was completely unreasonable. Whether you blocked it or not, the end result would be the same, and you really couldn't blame him. When Qingxiang said, "Although the fake acupoint is destroyed, the treasure bowl that gathers turbid qi is not damaged. Pingdu sect is only 10,000 miles away from here. If the qi rushes there, it will cause the clear and turbid qi to collide, and it can still disturb the spiritual opportunity. It will take more than a day for Qinsong School to sort it out. In this way, we can also mess up the layout of Pingdu sect." At this time, the jade bowl in Zhenren Li's hand trembled and turned into a beam of spiritual light, flying up and turning into a young man in Taoist robes. He bowed and said, "I am ashamed. Just now, I am afraid that the Xianmen Zhenren will use the spiritual opportunity to sense it and chase after me. So when I escaped, I have left all the turbid qi behind." The soul-examining bowl could guide the spiritual opportunity from several small spiritual acupoints in the surroundings and gather it in one place, forming an object shaped like a spiritual eye in a short time. He sensed that Zhang Yan was coming for the turbid qi in the alms bowl, and in order to avoid being injured by it, he took a step back. In order to avoid being hurt, of course, he threw it all away. When Qingxiang said, "It doesn't matter. In such a short time, the turbid qi will definitely not disperse. You can just suck it up again. Don't worry, Zhang Yan still hasn't shown up. He must have consumed a lot of mana, and may not dare to face the 5 Zenrins. Zhenren also said in support, "That's right, everyone. We were forced to retreat by Zhang Yan. If we go back like this, I'm afraid we won't have the face to face the sect. We might as well try again. Even if we don't succeed, it won't affect the current situation." The other 4 people all agreed in a low voice. This time, it was 5 against 1, but they still fell into the opponent's trap and retreated. They were really a little unwilling. Since there was still a chance, of course they would not give up. Hearing what they said, the bull spirit immediately set its mind at rest. With a shake of its body, it turned into a jade bowl and flew into the air. It turned its mouth upside down and began to suck in the turbid chi below. However, as soon as it moved, it felt that something was wrong. Although there was a lot of turbid air coming up from below, it didn't move. Although there was a lot of turbid chi below, it was far from what it had released just now. It couldn't help but be surprised. Zhenren also saw that something was wrong. The power of this treasure bowl could at least cover half of the southwest wall. The reason why he was able to build the fake spiritual acupoints so quickly was also thanks to this treasure that it could suck in the turbid chi from all directions. Now that it couldn't be sucked in, there must be something happening below that he didn't know. He was the person with the highest mana here. He immediately closed his eyes to sense, but he felt that the turbid chi below seemed to be subdued by an external force. Therefore, it couldn't be taken up. After thinking for a while, he guessed that it was Zhang Yan's doing. He sighed and told everyone about the situation. Hearing this, Wen Qingxiang let out a long sigh and said, "Fate, fate." After that, he didn't say anything else. The 5 people looked at each other. Seeing that there was no way to save the situation, they didn't want to entangle with each other. They turned into conveyance lights and returned to their respective sections. This time, no one stopped them. Zhou Ruiying watched the people of the Devil's Doctrine leave. He snorted and said disdainfully, "They just left like that." The Shadow sighed and said, "What else can they do if they don't leave? Do they have to fight to the death with Zhang Yan? If they had the intention, they wouldn't have let him succeed so easily just now." At this moment, tens of thousands of feet below the ground, Zhang Yan had his hands behind his back. His body was surrounded by tiny sparks of lightning. He had opened the door to the heavenly abode, guiding the turbid spiritual vigor in this place into his body. To prevent the people of the Devil's Doctrine from using the turbid chi again, he used his body as a bridge to connect the inner and outer heavens. Originally, there was only clear chi in the Shenyuan cave, so it was a mass of chaos. There was no distinction between yin and yang, and there was no distinction between up and down. Now that so much turbid yin chi had entered, the 2 chi collided. Naturally, the clear chi rose and the turbid chi fell. The turbid chi became the earth, and the clear chi became the sky. They separated further and further away from each other. Mountain River Boy appeared in the grotto heaven and used the power of the purple clear spiritual vigor to clear the mud and adjust the spirit. Mountains and hills were pulled up from the ground, and there was earth fire spilling out and rising up. Soon, thunder was born from the clouds, and yin and yang struck each other, causing rain to fall and moisturize the land. Zhang Yan was the master of the heavenly abode. Everything that was happening in this place was within his perception. He watched silently and could faintly sense some mysteries within. The turbid chi that was attracted by the soul judgment bowl was extremely large. Even if he tried his best to open the gate, it still took him a full 15 minutes to absorb it all. Without the influx of this chi, the opening of the world within the heavenly abode stopped. It looked like there was an island floating in the vast sea of clouds, and the surroundings were still chaotic. He had returned to protect the refining pagoda of the cult of Ding Ping, so he had no time to look at it. He made a hand seal and closed the gate. Just as he was about to leave, the demon's subduing slip between his eyebrows twitched slightly. He stopped in his tracks and looked to the side. His eyes also flickered slightly. After a short while, he smiled and turned into a ray of light, rushing to the surface. Thousands of miles away, Sima Quan was hiding in a ravine, but he was frightened by Zhang Yan's glance. He guessed that the latter had already sensed his existence, but had not come to find him because he was worried about the matter on the surface. Just now, when Zhang Yan was confronting the 5 people from the devil sect, he had thought of a way to live in the soul of one of them, but the 5 people were extremely vigilant and did not reveal any flaws. They should have already made preparations, and even when he left, he did not find a chance to do so. At this moment he was afraid of Zhang Yan, so he did not dare to stay here any longer. He turned his body, turned invisible, and flew away with a gust of chilly wind. Zhang Yan's ray of light was extremely fast, and it did not take long for him to return to the white jade platform. Shen Baishuang and the other 2 stood up and bowed. He returned the bow and said, "The Devil's Cave has been confirmed to be fake, and the few people from the Devil sect have already retreated. If they still care about their reputation, they will not come to bother us again." Shen Baishuang said, "This time, it's all up to Hall Master Du Zhen." Zhang Yan said, "If there were no 3 spiritual masters, I alone would not be able to guard this place." After saying that, he sat down on the platform. After he sat down, the 3 of them sat down, and as they had discussed before, they each guarded a position. In the next few days, there was indeed no one coming to disturb them, and the pearl slowly descended. On the 9th day, it finally landed on the top of the pagoda without any danger. At the moment when the 2 met, there was a bright light that shone through the southwest. Another ray of light suddenly flashed past East Flower, and with a flash, it disappeared. Then, there was the sound of a pearl falling, clear and melodious, and could be heard all over the continent. Zhang Yan and everyone else looked over, and saw that there was a 7-colored light shining on the body of the pagoda, as if it was covered with a layer of dazzling multicolored clothes. At this moment, within the hidden appearance pagoda, there was suddenly a rumbling sound, and the body of the pagoda rose up out of thin air. The shrine that was originally sealed in the top of the pagoda was also revealed. There were originally only 3 shrines on the top of the pagoda, but now there were 3 more, and finally, all 6 sides were complete. When Qi Hongchan saw this, although he looked tired, his eyes were extremely bright. With a long laugh, he stood up from the shrine. Spiritual Master Zhao and Spiritual Master Wu noticed this movement, and they stood up with excited expressions, looking at the changes around them. There were 3 more shrine seats, which meant that the number of Ping Du sect's grotto heaven was no longer limited to 3. When it was full, there could be at least 6 grotto heavens sitting there. And the restriction at the top was opened, which meant that there was still a path to Tao that could be walked, and there might be people who could use it to ascend to another world in the future. At this moment, there was a cry of surprise from below, and the 2 looked down. The number of shrine seats below had also doubled. Further down, at the base of the pagoda, the 2 guardian spirits that never showed themselves in front of people had also become 4. With the addition of the shrine seat at the top of the pagoda, the number of Dharma spirits that could be accommodated here was 731. Qi Hongchan leaped up and arrived at the top. Before he could take a closer look, the pearl at the top of the pagoda suddenly shone down with a ray of light, and it enveloped his body. His expression changed, and he knew that the opportunity had come. He immediately sat down cross-legged and meditated. Chapter 1130. After Qi Hongchan entered meditation, Perfected Master Zhao and Perfected Master Wu came out of the pagoda and bowed to the sky above. "Thank you for your help this time. I will definitely visit you in the future to thank you." A voice in the sky said, "Perfected Masters are too polite. I will definitely pass on your message." As soon as he said that, 2 beams of light flashed in the sky and left, flying northwest. Once the demon subduing mirrors left, Pingdu sect's protective formation once again enveloped the entire mountain gate. Perfected Master Zhao and Perfected Master Wu walked up to the white jade platform. Perfected Master Wu stepped forward and bowed to Zhang Yan and the others. "Our sect will forever remember the help of fellow Taoists from Qinsong School. However, Perfected Master is in seclusion to comprehend his cultivation and can't come personally. He only asked us to thank you on his behalf. Please don't be offended." Zhang Yan smiled. "Perfected Master, you're too kind. It's more important for sect Master Qi to improve his cultivation. Since your sect has already refined the pagoda, we won't disturb you any longer. After such a huge commotion and the arrival of the devil sect cultivators, Pingdu sect still had a lot of things to deal with. Perfected Master Wu knew it wasn't convenient to keep guests at this time, so he only said a few polite words and didn't ask them to stay. He sent the 4 of them out of the mountain gate's protective formation and another 1,000 li before returning. At this moment, more than 300 disciples had already come out of the pagoda. With these disciples around, the sect's affairs could naturally be sorted out. Perfected Master Wu came to the white jade platform with an excited expression. After refining the hidden appearance pagoda, Pingdu sect's foundation is no longer weaker than Nanhua, Taihao, and the other sections. When Perfected Master comes out of seclusion, our sect will prosper. Perfected Master Zhao sighed. With the calamity ahead, I'm afraid I won't have that much time. Perfected Master Wu chuckled. Perfected Master Zhao, what do you think of Perfected Master Zhang's methods? Perfected Master Zhao thought for a moment. Unfathomable. Perfected Master Wu said, the so-called calamity is nothing more than a battle with Yu Xiao. Although he has the help of Taihao, Pingdu, and heaven-mending sects, they're only on par with us. Moreover, these 3 sects may not be of the same mind as Yu Xiao. Not to mention the Qinsong school, even the Huanzhen temple has been friends with me for a long time. It can be said that we have advanced and retreated together. Taoist Master Zhao nodded. Their 3-sect alliance was indeed much more reliable than the Yu Xiao school. Looking at the current situation, they still had the upper hand. Thinking of this, he suddenly said, right? Before the refining pagoda, our Yu Xiao school seemed to have sent an envoy to Yuanyang. Apart from the 3 major sects, this sect is the strongest. If he were to side with Yu Xiao, it would be hard to predict. Master Wu frowned and said, Chu Rui is indeed extraordinary, but when the sect master comes out of seclusion, he won't be weaker than him. Besides, the Yuanyang sect has always wanted to become the 4th great sect. I've never been willing to submit to anyone. It's impossible for Yu Xiao to make me bow down to you with just words. Taoist Master Zhao lowered his head and thought about it. He said, I hope so. He turned his head and looked outside. The big cave outside the door should be a place where the turbid air gathers. Even if Zhenren Zhang destroys it, we have to be careful of any sinister tricks left behind by the devil sect. We have to deal with it appropriately. Master Wu said, don't move the mountains and topple the land. Since the sect master hasn't come out of seclusion, the 2 of us will have to work hard for a few days. Southwest of Donghua, in a cave near the sea. Suddenly, a cold wind swept past. Sima Quan gathered the smoke. He appeared from within. Hui Shao immediately knelt on the ground and said, Disciple respectfully welcomes Master. Sima Quan said, Rise. He rolled up his sleeves and shook them. He took out the cauldron again and sneered, Fortunately, I've taken precautions and have this place to hide. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. He had already prepared a few residences to deal with today's situation. Above the cauldron, there was a black smoke hanging down. He stepped on top of the cauldron and turned around to sit down. He said, Are the disciples injured? Hui Shao said, Fortunately, Master took care of us. The disciples retreated in time, and none of them were injured. It's just that it's a pity to abandon many of the residences that were built over many years. Sima Quan waved his hand and said, As long as there are people here, the residences can be built again. It's not a big deal. Hui Shao lowered his head and said, Master is right. Disciples' knowledge is shallow. Sima Quan calculated in his heart. With the arrival of the calamity, there would be more and more battles in the continent in the future. He didn't have any allies by his side, and he had to fight alone every time. Once he lost, he could only hide, which was extremely disadvantageous to him. If he could, he would rather rely on one of the families. Unfortunately, he had the body of a heavenly demon. Even if he claimed to have gotten rid of his heavenly demon nature, no one would believe him. No matter who it was, they would only see him as a mortal enemy and would not accept him. As for the disciples, their cultivation was shallow and could not help him at the moment. If he had 1,000 years of seclusion, There might be some possibility. But he could feel that in at most a few hundred years, there would be great changes in Donghua continent. Thinking about this, he asked again, how is Huilan's side? Hui Xiao said, junior sister came to report not long ago that the sects established by the two junior brothers have already acknowledged the Bone Yin sect as the superior sect. Sima Quan said, that's right. Among the 6 sects, the Bone Yin sect and the Origin Mirage sect are the weakest. They usually take good care of the sects that seek refuge with them, which is convenient for me to lay upon. Hui Xiao said, it's just that they are still newly attached, so it's hard to trust them. I don't know how long it will take to complete Master's great plan. Sima Quan grunted in agreement. He thought deeply for a moment and said, originally, I had a plan that could allow the 2 sects to gain the trust of the superior sect. I'm just afraid that if I push it too hastily, it will arouse their suspicions. But from the looks of it, Donghua continent is becoming more and more unstable. I don't know when the calamity will descend, so I can't wait any longer. He pointed his finger, and a talisman flew down. He said, what is recorded in this is the method to restrain the 6-Yin demon bug. You can ask him to hand it over. Hui Xiao held it in her hands, but her face turned pale with fright. She said, Master, if this method is leaked out, then wouldn't the 6 sects be able to restrain Master's methods? Sima Quan laughed loudly and said, how can it be so simple? It's just a restriction. Why would I bind my own hands? I can break it at any time. He sneered again. As for leaking it out, that's exactly what I want, lest the 6 sects pursue me relentlessly. Hui Xiao let out a long breath and said, disciple has worried too much. She kowtowed. Disciple will do it now. Inside the Yuanyang sect, Bai Hall Master Zhou Liguang stood on a flat cliff, silently feeling the changes in the spiritual opportunity here. After a long time, he sighed softly. Before coming here, he thought that the Yuanyang sect taking the risk to promote a disciple into the grotto heaven would inevitably cause the spirit cave to be unstable. In order to rope him in, he was instructed by the Hall Master Kang Jing. He especially came to do a favor and try to rope him into the Yuxiao school. But after coming here, he was surprised to find that the spirit cave in the Yuanyang sect was stable. On the surface, it seemed that there would be no change for at least 100 years. This made him very confused. He was afraid that the Yuanyang sect had used some method to hide from his eyes and ears, so he found an excuse to stay. He didn't expect that after a month of observation, he didn't find anything wrong, which made him quite disappointed. This meant that it would be difficult to achieve his goal. Fortunately, the Yuanyang sect didn't make any move to the Qinsong school. At least he didn't lose any good news. On the other side, the Yuanyang sect Master Chu Rui and a middle-aged Taoist were sitting in an elegant pavilion, drinking and enjoying the scenery in front of the mountain. Seeing that it was almost dusk, the middle-aged Taoist held the wine cup in his hand and said, that Jinren Zhou has been here for a month, but the sect master hasn't responded. Does he have no intention of joining the Yuxiao school? Chu Rui smiled and said, he asked you to come here? The middle-aged Taoist admitted, other than this Jinren Zhou, who else? Chu Rui smiled and said, the Yuxiao school saw Pingdu sects refining pagoda this time, so they were a little anxious. It's at this time that we can't make a decision easily. The middle-aged Taoist hesitated. He cupped his hands and said, forgive me for being blunt, but what is the sect master senior brother's plan? Seeing that the dispute in Donghua is rising, if you want to stay out of it, I'm afraid it will be very difficult. Chu Rui stood up and looked at the lake at the foot of the mountain with his hands behind his back. He said, ever since the Yuanyang sect obtained the vital essence stone, the spirit cave is no longer a problem. We don't have anything to ask of anyone. At this time, the Yuxiao school wants to persuade me to join them with just a few words, but it's too easy for them. The middle-aged Taoist thought about it. He raised his head and said, sect master senior brother wants Yuxiao to show more sincerity? Chu Rui said plainly, what can Yuxiao give me? The middle-aged Taoist was startled. Then he changed his mind and said, although we don't need any help now, the vital essence stone can only last for 100 years, then after 100 years. Chu Rui raised his hand and interrupted him. He looked up at the horizon and said, "The future of our sect cannot be decided in a hurry. Of course, we have to be very careful. The situation is not clear now, and it's still too early to say what to do. We have to wait." The middle-aged Taoist sighed and said, "I'm afraid we can't wait." Chu Rui smiled and said, "Ling Yao is waiting, and so is Sect Master Qin of Qinsong School. Why can't the Yuanyang sect wait?" Zhang Yan and the other three left the southwest and returned to the mountain gate of Qinsong a few days later. After entering the great lake of Longyuan, he cupped his hands and said, "I'll report to the sect master. The three of you can leave first." When Xin Bai Shuang and the other two heard him, they bowed and returned to their cave residences. Zhang Yan called Jiang Zheng to the front of the carriage and said, "Since you've become a Dharmakaya, you can go to the Duzhen Hall to cultivate. I need to see the sect master. You can go by yourself with my token." With a flick of his finger, a spiritual light flew down. Jiang Zheng bowed and accepted it. He said, "I'll remember." Zhang Yan urged the carriage to go to the floating heavenly palace. When he arrived at the main hall, he got off the carriage. After reporting to the sect master, he walked in and stood in the spacious hall. He cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, immortal sect master." Sect Master Qin nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Take a seat, Hall Master Duzhen." After thanking him, Zhang Yan went to his seat and sat down. Sect Master Qin said, "I saw what happened in the southwest clearly in the palace. Hall Master Duzhen handled it well." Zhang Yan said, "This is what I should do." Both Immortal Zhao and Immortal Wu benefited from the pearl. Now that the hidden appearance pagoda has been restored and Sect Master Qi is in seclusion to comprehend martial arts, I think that when he comes out, his strength will be stronger than before. Since he is my ally, it will be very beneficial to me in the future. Sect Master Qin said, "We can't be careless. Pingdu sect has the hidden appearance pagoda. Other sects also have their own treasures. We need to be prepared before the disaster begins." Zhang Yan nodded. In fact, after he knew about the sect master's plan, he knew that the sect had been methodically refining instruments and prohibitions and collecting all kinds of strange items. It was all for the sake of having a way to deal with these treasures once the disaster begins. Sect Master Qin said, "Hall Master Duzhen, do you still remember the real dragon soul essence that Protector Lu retrieved?" Zhang Yan said, "Of course I remember." Sect Master Qin smiled and said, "The former sect master didn't do it for this treasure, but for another thing." Zhang Yan was surprised. "What is an unknown thing?" Sect Master Qin said, "More than 10,000 years ago, there were two heavenly demons that were the most difficult to deal with. One was the dragon monarch, Ji Wuwang, and the other was the sun-swallowing green locust. Although all the demons in the world worshipped the dragon monarch in name, only the demon locust did not listen to orders. Ji Wuwang knew how powerful it was and did not seek trouble with it, allowing it to dominate the South Cliff continent. After that, the West continent cultivators came from the east. The dragon monarch was killed by my patriarch, and the sun-swallowing green locust was suppressed under the West Sea's eye by the West continent sages. It was wrapped in an instrument on the outside and a small world on the inside, so it could not come out again." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "The dragon soul essence can control the water of the four seas. Is it because of the sun-swallowing green locust that the sect took?" Sect Master Qin said in a deep voice, "Whether it's the instrument suppressed under the West Sea or the body of this heavenly demon, they can all be of help to my plan." Zhang Yan said solemnly, "If Sect Master Zhenren has any instructions, I will do it." Sect Master Qin nodded and said, "Although the sun-swallowing green locust was not as powerful as Ji Wuwang, it was not far behind. That day, we only suppressed it and did not kill it. Although more than 10,000 years have passed, it may not be dead. To be safe, Yu Huoxian, Protector Lu, and Brother Mu will go together." "Shinran Mu?" Zhang Yan was slightly surprised, but seeing that the sect master had no intention of explaining, he did not ask further. He bowed and said, "May I ask Sect Master, when should I set off?" Sect Master Qin smiled and said, Hall Master Duzhen has just returned. There is no need to rush. You can go back and recover your mana first. This is not a small matter, and the sect needs time to prepare. When the time is right, we will inform you. Zhang Yan nodded and said, I understand. After coming out of the hall of Duzhen, he first went back to the hall to meditate. After half a day, he came out and said to the formation spirit, Go and bring me the records about the sun-swallowing green locust in the hall of Duzhen. The formation spirit answered and left. After a while, the array door in the sky opened, and a jade scroll fell on the table. Zhang Yan picked it up, opened it, and glanced at it. From the words in the jade scroll, it should have been recorded by the cultivators of the West Continent. It recorded the process of suppressing the green locust. This group of people wanted to destroy the heavenly demon, but they did not act blindly. They probed for many years and used many strategies to lead it to the West Sea step by step. Finally, they succeeded. The record here was especially detailed, and it was suspected that it was written by the people who participated in it. After reading it, he said, No wonder Sect Master Jinren is so serious and wants the four of us to go. From the looks of this jade scroll, the green locust was not seriously injured that day. Although it has been 10,000 years and cannot be compared to the past, it may not be easy to deal with. Chapter 1131. Ever since Zhang Yan returned from the Pingdu sect, he had been practicing his divine powers every day. In the blink of an eye, 10 years had passed. On this day, he went to the little cold world to fight against Mu Shoshan as promised. This time, Mu Shoshan had purposely refined a few enchanted instruments to restrain him. However, it was not as if he had not improved. As his cultivation advanced, his control over his mana became more harmonious. Unsurprisingly, Jinren Mu was still defeated. After the fight, Mu Shoshan did not look unhappy. He invited Zhang Yan to sit in his hut and offered him a cup of tea instead of wine. He said, After this fight, I feel that my obsession has suffered a great setback. However, it is not enough to erase it completely. Even if I do it 8 or 10 more times, it may not be possible. I still need a strong medicine. Zhang Yan smiled and said, The sun-swallowing green locust must be the strong medicine that Jinren mentioned. Jinren Mu patted his knee and said, That's right. This sky demon has been trapped for more than 10,000 years, so he should still have some strength. This time, he might be able to help me erase this last obsession from my heart mirror. Zhang Yan nodded. Mu Shoshan's cultivation was profound and he knew many divine powers. He also had 2 Dharma images. If he could wholeheartedly work for the sect, he would undoubtedly become a pillar of the sect. However, that obsession was especially stubborn. Although he could continuously weaken it, as he said, it was very difficult to completely eliminate it. If he could borrow the power of the demonic insect to eliminate this hidden danger, it was worth a try. Sect leader Qin must have seen this, which was why he was willing to let this person out. Zhang Yan did not sit for long before he left and returned to the Duzhen Hall. He circulated his mana, and lightning flashed on his body. The scenery in front of him changed. He had entered the Xianyuan cave. After the grotto heaven scripture led in the turbid air, the higher the sky, the deeper the earth. The first wind of yin and yang was originally violent. However, after 10 years of cultivation by Mountain River Child, it had gradually become subdued. It looked clear and empty, and the mountains and rivers gradually flourished. His figure flashed and arrived at the peak of the tallest mountain here. The mountain range here rose steeply from the ground and spanned over 500 kilometers. When looked at from here, it was a vast and boundless land that stretched as far as the eye could see. At this time, a lot of pure purple spiritual vigor poured in. It might even give birth to plants and creatures. However, this place was not a small world, so there was no need to add such things. He could build a few palaces and did not need to use the illusory realm to make up for it. However, he was not willing to use the things from the outside world to fill in this place. It was inevitable that the spiritual vigor would be contaminated and it would not be beautiful. At this time, Mountain River Child, also noticed his arrival and appeared to greet him. He said, "Greetings, Master." Zhang Yan waved his hand and said, "No need for formalities." He pointed at his feet. "Zhenrenmu Master," he said. "Zhen Child, Mountain River Child, I, Mountain, Master, Child, Mountain River Zhang, Yan, and Master of Child of Chen Yan. Mountain Zhang Chen, of Zhang of Luo." He sat on the jade platform and closed his eyes to meditate. After a few months, a spiritual light came to the Duzhen Hall and stopped in front of the hall. It caused the bell hanging under the eaves to ring. Zhang Yan immediately sensed it, and with a sweep of his divine sense, he received the spiritual light. He held it in his hand and saw that it was a jade talisman. It was the sect leader's order. He thought to himself, 10 years of preparation, it's time to move. 3 days later, Little Cold World. Zhang Yan, Hua Xian, and Lu Junyang stood at a corner outside the world gate. Beside the three of them, there were 2 cultivators, one male and one female. The male was around 20 years old. He had a strong body and looked like he was in Yuanying realm. He was the disciple that Qi Yuntian took in after entering the grotto heaven. His name was Guan Inyue. The female looked 17 or 18 years old. She was dressed in red and had a sword by her waist. She stood behind Guan Inyue. She was Zhou Xian's disciple, Zhou Xian. After waiting for a while, the door in the world opened. Mu Shoshan, dressed in white, walked out from the restriction formation. This was the first time in nearly 900 years that he had come out of the sealed realm pass. Looking around at the clear world, he felt a sense of melancholy. However, at this time in the sect, besides sect leader Qi Yuntian, and the few people here, no one knew that he had come out. After he was done being emotional, he greeted Zhang Yan and the others. Guan Inyue came up and bowed. "Zhenrenmu, I am here under the order of the sect leader." Mu Shoshan said lazily, "I know why you are here. Hand over the talisman." Guan Inyue straightened his body and apologized. He took out an item from his sleeves and took it out. It drew a ray of light and entered Mu Shoshan's body. The latter didn't move and let him do what he wanted. After all, he was still a sinner, so he needed to plant a talisman on his body. If anything happened, or if his avatar came out to cause trouble, then the talisman would immediately come out to restrain his Fa. That way, any one of his companions could come out and easily capture him back. When the brilliance gradually faded, he asked, "Is it time to move?" Guan Inyue bowed and took a step back. He said, "This matter should be decided by the 2 hall masters. It is not my place to interrupt." Zhang Yan looked at the time and said, 10 years of preparation is for today. Now is the best time to move. What does Hall Master Dikong think? Hua Xian nodded. Since there is nothing else, there is no need to delay. Let's go. This trip to the West Ocean was secretive. They couldn't let Yu Xiao and the other factions find out. Therefore, the group hid their auras and rode on the clouds. They first went north, past the Middle Pillar continent, and headed west. About 20 days later, they arrived at the West Ocean. They searched for a few days according to the records of the predecessors before confirming the location of the land. Zhang Yan took out a jade talisman from his sleeves. It was about the height of a palm and the width of 4 fingers. The talisman was hollow, and there was a small dragon swimming around in it. It was as if it thought it was in the deep ocean. This was the dragon's soul essence. However, it had already been refined by sect Master Qin into a Dharma artifact. It could be controlled by people. When it was time to use it, there was no need to refine it in advance. He threw the talisman down and allowed it to sink into the sea. After a while, the bottom of the sea surged violently, and finally, a path opened up. Zhang Yan called out, and everyone used their qi to descend. Wherever they passed, the sea behind them closed up, and there was no trace of it. Originally, this dragon soul essence could control the water of the 4 seas. As long as there was enough magic power, it could even lift up the entire sea. However, if they did this, ordinary grotto heaven cultivators might not notice anything strange, but they couldn't hide it from those who had refined their nascent fetus. Therefore, they had to be careful. As the jade talisman continued to sink, The group also went deeper and deeper. After nearly 20 days, the talisman suddenly stopped, as if it was blocked by something. Zhang Yan looked down and saw that there was a wide ravine below them. The two ends stretched out, and he couldn't see the end. In the ravine, there was a thick and heavy wall of water. It looked similar to lead, but the seawater outside was completely different. Huoxian said, "This must be the deep depth of heavy water recorded in the ancient books." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Yes, it is. Only this kind of heavy water can suppress that heavenly demon." The deep depth of heavy water was extremely heavy. Rumor had it that only a drop of it could sink a mountain. When Shen Baishuang established the sect in Dongxing, it was named after this water. This water was originally widely distributed in the 4 seas. Back then, the cultivators of the West continent spent many years searching for it. In the end, they condensed it into a layer of water shield and filled the eye of the sea to suppress the sun-swallowing green locust. Even if the 4 of them were here, they might not be able to move this heavy water away with their magic power even if they spent more than 100 years. However, everything in the world had its weakness. No matter how the water was, it was still formed by heaven and earth. With the dragon soul essence, it could still be moved. Zhang Yan waved his hand and took the jade talisman in his hand. He silently circulated his magic power for a moment and shook it downward. The surface of the talisman slowly cracked, but it was only as small as a hair. He had to constantly increase his strength to expand it. Zhou Xian followed beside Guan Yingyue and asked softly, "Youngest Uncle Master, I heard that the dragon talisman was in the hands of the demon Lord Ji Wang of the Lord Origin Palace. When the descendant of the dragon god was weak, why didn't he use this item to release the green locust?" Guan Yingyue explained, "Although the dragon god and the demonic insect are both heavenly demons, they are not on the same side. They are even wary of each other. How would the Ji clan be willing to let it out? Even the 8 demon marquises are not willing to have another person on top of them. Furthermore, there is a Xianmen restriction below. Even if a non-human cultivator could open this deep depth of heavy water, they would not be able to enter this place." As the gap below gradually widened, a ray of light appeared inside. Zhang Yan said, "Please enter first, I will follow later." Huoxian and the others did not hesitate. They swept up Guan Yingyue and Zhou Xian, turned into light and flew inside. Soon they disappeared. Zhang Yan rolled up his sleeves and kept the jade talisman. He used the water escape technique of the 5 elements escape technique and passed through without any hindrance. With his current mana, it was easy for him to escape alone, but it would be difficult for him to bring his peers along. After walking for a short distance, he passed the water wall. His body suddenly felt lighter, and he found himself inside a tall and spacious palace. He looked around and saw that Huoxian and the others were standing not far away. In front of them, there was a Taoist. He had his hair in a bun and was dressed in a simple robe. His back was facing everyone, and right in front of him was a stone arch. Inside the arch, clouds and mist churned, but from time to time, there would be flashes of light. It was clearly a gateway to a small world, and this was the path to the place where the green locust was trapped. LV Junyang looked at the back of the Taoist and said, "This must be the ancestor who was in charge of guarding the hall in the early years." Zhang Yan nodded. He had read the records. At that time, although the Western continent cultivators had suppressed the demonic insect, because they were unable to kill it, they had no choice but to guard against it breaking through the barrier and escaping. Thus, they sent people to guard this place. Mu Shoshan walked forward and stood in front of the Taoist. He looked over and saw that the person had a thin face and a long gray beard. He sat with his eyes closed and held a long sword in his hand. The scabbard fell not far in front of him. He sighed and said, "This person pulled out his sword outside. It is obvious that until he died, he did not forget his duty to guard the place." As he spoke, the sword in the person's hand suddenly made a sound. It jumped up and slashed straight at his face. When Guan Yingyue and Zhou Xian saw this, they could not help but be shocked. The latter even exclaimed. Zhang Yan, Huoxian, and LV Junyang saw this, but their expressions were calm, as if they were not surprised at all. Mu Shoshan's eyes moved, and he snorted. He raised 2 fingers and firmly stopped the sword light. Chapter 1132. Mu Shoshan stood in front of the sword gleam and grabbed it in his hand. With a flick of his finger, the sword vibrated and emitted a clear sound. It turned into a ball of flowing light, as though it could fly away if he released it. He praised, after more than 10,000 years, this sword still has not lost its spirituality. It moves according to the qi. The arrangement of the ancestors is indeed exquisite. After sighing, he turned back and said, "You may take a look." He loosened his fingers and let the sword gleam fly away. Zhang Yan glanced at it. Under the guidance of his divine will, he wrapped it with mana and brought it in front of him. After sensing for a moment, he looked at the entrance of the small world and said thoughtfully, "It seems that the rumors are true. The things here can be nourished by external qi. No wonder it can survive for 10,000 years. In that case, the demonic insect is still alive in this world." In ancient times, the cultivators of the West continent did not leave this passage for the demonic insect to come up, but for a special purpose. Under the deep abyssal heavy water, this palace was formed by the treasure that sealed the demonic insects. However, no matter what kind of magical treasure it was, if it was not refined and nourished by someone for tens of thousands of years, or if a sealing technique was applied to it, then even if it was immortal, it would inevitably decline. In response to this, the cultivators of the West continent set up a method to let the treasured weapon continuously absorb vitality from the body of the demonic insect. On one hand, it weakened the sun-swallowing green locust, and on the other hand, it nourished the treasured weapon. As long as the demonic insect did not die, the treasured weapon would not stop. But even after 10,000 years of imprisonment, the sky demon did not really die. It was not difficult to imagine how strong it was when it was at its peak. No wonder when Dragon Monarch Ji Wang sealed all the demons in the world, she did not come to provoke it. Zhang Yan had seen the remains of the Dragon Monarch and knew the power of such a demon. But since Qin Song School was compared to other sects, it had an advantage. After more than 10,000 years of fighting with the demonic cultivators, not only did they restrain the demons, but they also refined many treasured weapons to kill demons. To ensure success, sect leader Qin personally came forward to talk about the pros and cons, and invited the North Underworld Heavenly Sword to accompany them. If the other party was really not something they could deal with, then they could use this sword to achieve their goal. Huo Xian looked up and said, "If we can resolve this matter, we'll have to deal with it. If we take back the deep abyssal water, our Qinsong school will be able to obtain another sect treasure." Mu Shoshan agreed. This abyssal heavy water is indeed a good item. If it falls into the hands of a cultivator who specializes in water techniques, its power would be unimaginable. Even a defensive true artifact would find it hard to block it. In the past, Master had set his eyes on this item, but unfortunately, he wasn't able to obtain it. Zhang Yan knew that he was not exaggerating. Although there was a lot of heavy water in front of him, tens of thousands of years ago, the sages of the past had spent a lot of effort to gather it drop by drop with a special magical instrument. Just now, he had sensed that with his current body's transcendence energy, at most, it could only control a handful of water. This was heavy water that could even suppress a sky demon. Luckily, he had the dragon's soul essence with him. Once he was done, he could take it with him. Otherwise, he would only be able to bring back a small amount. Guaning Yue's heart jumped. He went to Lu Junyang, who had not spoken, and asked, "Spiritual Master Lu, Junior has a question. This heavy water is such a good item, why didn't the other disciples come to take it?" Lu Junyang was impatient. He said calmly, "Even Spiritual Master Grotto Heaven wouldn't be able to come here without a magical instrument. This water is too heavy. Even a drop is as heavy as 5 mountains and 3 mountains. It can't be stored in a sleeve. Cultivators can only use their own transcendence energy to carry it. Think about it. If you were to carry such heavy pressure when you were walking, sitting, or fighting with others, what would it be like?" Guan Yingyue just listened and felt the weight on his back. He looked above him, and his gaze was filled with respect. He sighed and cupped his hands. "Thank you, spiritual master, for answering my question." Mu Shoshan glanced over and smiled. "Even though you cultivate water techniques, you are not proficient enough. When you have mastered it, it won't be too late to think about this water." When Guan Yingyue heard this, he quickly said, "Spiritual master, you are right." After Zhang Yan walked one round in front of the world gate, he replied, "Everyone, this matter isn't urgent. We can discuss it when we return. Later, the 3 spiritual masters and I will enter the small world to suppress the demons. The 2 martial nephews will stay here and provide support." Guan Yingyue and Zhou Xian bowed and accepted the order. Zhang Yan reached into his sleeve and took out 5 smooth golden pearls. He tossed them out. Other than keeping one in his hand, he gave the rest away. He said solemnly, "Please carry this pearl with you. This concerns whether we can return safely. Don't damage it or lose it." It was easy to enter the 2 worlds, but difficult to get out. If one did not plan in advance and entered the inner room without being able to find a way out, they would be sealed in the inner room like the demon insect. The pearl was called the Revealing Death Pearl. It was born in a demon called the Tidal Smoke Muscle. Every full moon, it would come up to absorb essence and collect spiritual opportunity. Every time the muscle bloomed, there would be smoke rising into the air. It was as clear as the moonlight, and it would form pearls. After 1,000 years, 6 pearls would be formed. The pearls had a magical effect. People who wore the same pearls could sense each other no matter how far apart they were, even if they were separated by 2 worlds. If they were not far apart, they could even check each other's whereabouts. To the cultivators in the grotto heaven, as long as they had a trace of spiritual opportunity, they would be able to return after sensing it. They would not have to worry about being lost in this world. After the 4 of them adjusted their breathing, they bowed to the Taoist's remains and walked into the world gate. After they disappeared, Zhou Xian asked curiously, "Junior Uncle Master, do you know why the spiritual masters subdued this sky demon?" Guan Yingyue shook his head. "The sect has its own plans. Martial nephew, don't ask." Although he was a disciple of Qi Yuntian, the grand scheme of the Yudzong sect was not something he could know. He came here to broaden his horizons and also to wait here as a person carrying the pearl so that he could help Zhang Yan and the others escape. Naturally, there were 4 spiritual masters in the grotto heaven realm. The sect would not entrust such a grand matter to 2 juniors. The last revealing death pearl was still in the sect to prevent accidents. After Zhang Yan crossed the realm gate, he found himself in a tall cave. The stone around him was dark red and dark gold. It was as if it was made of copper and iron. There was a big hole at the top that led to an unknown place. The jade scroll only described the layout of the outer realm in detail, but it didn't mention anything about the inner realm. That was why he wasn't in a rush to act and just observed. He found that the spiritual energy here was so thin that it was almost non-existent. He immediately knew that once he collided with the green locust, it would be difficult for him to recover if he couldn't kill it in one go. He waited for a while, but the 3 of them didn't come. He thought, "It seems that there are other arrangements here. We may not appear in the same place." Fortunately, he had considered this possibility before he entered. He used the revealing death pearl to sense, but he was surprised to find that they were very far apart. It would take at least a few days to gather in the same place. Since that was the case, he was not in a hurry to meet up. He decided to explore the surroundings first. With a move of his mind, a sword light flew out from between his eyebrows. It turned into countless rainbows and flew in all directions. After half an hour, he finally explored the place. He was currently within a majestic mountain, and the belly of the mountain was densely packed with caves like a beehive. Almost the entire mountain range had been hollowed out, and it was obvious that it had been eroded by an external force. At this moment, his expression changed slightly. The sword light had discovered something again. He formed a hand seal and used the 5 elements escape technique. In an instant he escaped underground. After a few dozen breaths, he landed in a cave. His eyes flashed. Lying here was a large worm with a body like a white elephant. It was 100 feet long and 30 feet tall. Its head was swollen, and its neck was covered with a carapace. There was a row of short tentacles under its body, and its tail was hooked into the ground. Its entire body was as white as jade, and there was no hair or beard on it. However, there was no sign of life at this moment, as if it had been dead for a long time. Zhang Yan thought for a bit. Looking at its appearance, it should be the elephant worm. The elephant worm and the vermilion candle worm were both descendants of the sun-swallowing green locust. However, he was a little surprised to see them here. He thought to himself, in that case, it's not just the sun-swallowing green locust that's sealed here. It's very likely that even its descendants are sealed here. The sun-swallowing green locust was not alone. It had many descendants, and they were all over the South Cliff continent. Even now, many poisonous insects in the continent were more or less related to it. When the West Continent cultivators fought with it, they not only had to deal with it, but also had to deal with the overwhelming number of strange insects. However, this was not a bad thing for him. The bodies of these ancient demonic insects were good treasures. If he took them back, he could refine them into treasures. He shook his sleeves, and with a swooshing sound, a torrential water light rushed out and engulfed the insect. After moving the insect away, he saw that there was a smooth and flat stone where it was originally lying. He looked at it and was surprised. Reflective stone? Many of the jade slips commonly used by cultivators were made of this kind of stone. In addition to imparting techniques, one could also transfer their own memories and past experiences into it. Zhang Yan thought that the insect was lying on this stone. Obviously, it had something important to tell its kind, so he said, "Well, let's see what kind of scene you left here that day." He looked at it, and the big stone floated up from the pit. With a flick of his finger, a spiritual light shot into it. After a while, there was a light on it, and a vague figure appeared. It could be recognized that it was a Taoist in a wide robe. Not far from him, there were more than 10 elephant worms, each as big as a mountain. This person didn't seem to care about them at all. He casually stretched out his hand, and a faint smoke flew into his hand. All the elephant worms collapsed to the ground, and after a while, they died one after another. After the Taoist finished doing this casually, he seemed to have noticed a target and turned into a streak of light that soared into the sky. The light dimmed, and the scene was interrupted. There was no more movement on the stone slab. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.